There are infinite realities in the multiverse, but only one where hope itself is a contagion that births demons. This is the story of a man who could bend one reality to his will, and what happened when he entered a universe that bent back. Neo had saved humanity once. He'd sacrificed himself, become something more than human, bridged the gap between man and machine. In the Matrix, he was a god. He could stop bullets with a thought, rewrite code with a gesture, see the underlying structure of a digital reality and reshape it to his will. He'd earned his rest in that green-tinted digital paradise where humans and machines finally found peace. But the multiverse cares nothing for happy endings. If you crave more tales where hope dies screaming, smash that subscribe button, because in the 41st millennium, even legends from other realities learn that the Emperor protects only those wise enough to fear what lies beyond the stars. The transition began during what should have been a routine code dive. Neo was helping maintain the new human-machine civilization, ensuring the Matrix remained stable for those who chose to stay connected. Trinity was with him, her presence a familiar comfort in the data streams. They were investigating an anomaly, a piece of corrupted code that seemed to exist in multiple places at once, spreading through the system like a virus, but leaving no trace of its origin. "Neo, something's wrong," Trinity said, her avatar flickering beside him in the code space. "This corruption? It's not binary, it's not even quantum, it's something else." He'd reached out to examine it, confident in his abilities. In the Matrix, he was still the one. His consciousness touched the anomaly, and for a fraction of a second he felt something reach back. Something vast. Something that had been watching and waiting for exactly this moment. The code around him twisted. Not in the clean mathematical way of the Matrix, but in a way that felt organic. Alive. Wrong. He tried to disconnect, but the pathways back to his body were gone. The green rain of code turned red, then black, then colors that had no names. Trinity's scream echoed through dimensions as reality itself rejected his presence and spat him out into somewhere else entirely. Neo opened his eyes, his real eyes, though he had no memory of them closing, and immediately knew he'd made a terrible mistake. The air tasted of rust and desperation. He was lying in filth on broken rockcrete, surrounded by a darkness so complete it felt solid. The only light came from flickering lumens mounted on walls that stretched up into an impossible distance. The architecture was wrong. Too tall, too angular, covered in skulls and eagles and symbols that hurt to look at directly. He tried to jack out. Nothing happened. He reached for the code, for that familiar sensation of the Matrix responding to his will. The air shimmered around his hand, and for a moment, he felt reality start to bend. Then something in the darkness screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of physics breaking, of dimensions tearing, of something vast and hungry noticing a wound in the fabric of space. Neo stumbled backward, his power cutting off instantly. The scream faded, but he could still feel something watching him from just beyond the veil of reality. He wasn't in the Matrix anymore. And whatever rules governed this place, they were written in blood and nightmare. The memory hit him like feedback through a neural jack. Trinity's voice, distorted and desperate, in those final moments before the transition. He'd been so focused on the anomaly that he'd missed her warning. Now, standing in this nightmare of rust and decay, he replayed those last seconds in his mind with perfect clarity. "Neo, stop! The pattern, it's not code, it's screaming. Can't you hear it? Every line is a voice, and they're all in pain." Trinity had grabbed his avatar, trying to pull him back from the corruption. But he'd already touched it. Already made contact with something that existed outside the clean logic of the Matrix. The corrupted data hadn't been a virus. It had been bait. In the darkness of the Underhive, Neo pressed his back against a wall covered in strange Gothic script. His enhanced perception, the gift that let him see code, see truth beneath illusion, was still active. But what it showed him here made no sense. When he focused on the walls, he didn't see mathematical structures or binary cascades. He saw layers of reality, translucent and shimmering, with something moving between them. Something with too many eyes and geometries that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. He squeezed his eyes shut, cutting off the perception. The visions stopped, but the sensation of being watched intensified. Trinity had seen it too, in those final moments. The corruption had shown its true nature, not a string of malicious code, but a doorway. And on the other side, something had been pulling, something that recognized what Neo was, what he could do, and wanted him desperately. The question was why? First time in the Underhive, smooth skin? Neo spun toward the voice. A figure emerged from the shadows, human, or at least humanoid. The man was skeletal thin, covered in layers of filthy rags that might have once been clothing. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but they focused on Neo with disturbing accuracy. He carried a crude blade made from what looked like sharpened scrap metal. "Where am I?" Neo asked, keeping his hands visible but ready. Even without the Matrix, his combat training remained. He'd fought in reality, not just code. He knew how to handle himself. The skeletal man laughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Tertium hive, stranger. Sump levels. You're about 8 kilometers below the grace of the God Emperor. May his light never reach these depths." He tilted his head, studying Neo with those blind-looking eyes. "But you don't know that, do you? Don't know where you are. Don't know what you are." The man's expression shifted to something like pity. "The pressed gangs will love you. Fresh meat, no guild marks, no hive tattoos. They'll sell you to the corpse starch factories or the labor pits. Might last a month if you're lucky." Neo tried again to reach for that power, that connection to reality's underlying code. The air rippled around him, and immediately pain lanced through his skull. It felt like his brain was being pulled in multiple directions at once, stretched across dimensions that his mind wasn't designed to perceive. He gasped and released whatever he'd been touching. The skeletal man's eyes widened. "Throne of Terra, you're a weird, an unsanctioned psyker." He stumbled backward, making a strange gesture across his chest, the sign of the Aquila, though Neo didn't know it. "Stay back! I want no part of whatever damnation you've called down." "I'm not a—" Neo started, but the man was already running, disappearing into the darkness with surprising speed. His voice echoed back. "The Arbites! Someone call the Arbites! Unsanctioned psyker in Sector 7 Gamma!" Neo stood alone in the darkness, Trinity's warning echoing in his memory. The corruption had tasted like screaming, she'd said. Now he understood. This entire reality tasted like screaming, and somehow he'd been pulled into it deliberately. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the heavy tread of boots. Many boots, moving with military precision. And above it all, a sound that made his enhanced hearing cringe. The howl of sirens that seemed designed specifically to inspire fear. They were coming for him. And Neo had no idea how to fight enemies in a world where using his powers seemed to tear holes in reality itself. The hive city of Tertium was a monument to humanity's capacity for survival at any cost. Neo didn't know this yet, but he could feel it in the architecture. The weight of billions of souls pressing down through kilometers of habitation levels, factories, and industrial zones. The underhive where he'd materialized was the foundation upon which an empire of misery was built. He moved through the darkness with the fluid grace of someone who'd fought agents in the Matrix. But here, every instinct screamed warnings. The air itself felt hostile. Chemical runoff dripped from pipes overhead, eating through the rockcrete floor in slow, patient corrosion. Somewhere in the distance, machinery groaned with a rhythm that sounded almost like breathing. The walls were covered in graffiti, crude symbols and prayers to something called the God Emperor, mixed with warnings about gangers, muties, and things with names that made no linguistic sense. Neo's mind raced, trying to find patterns in the chaos. In the Matrix, understanding the system had been key to controlling it. Here, he needed to understand the rules before he accidentally broke something catastrophic. His brief attempt to manipulate reality had felt wrong, not like touching code, but like reaching into an open wound. The pain had been real, physical, and carried with it a sensation of something noticing him from the other side of that wound. The sound of boots grew closer. Neo ducked into an alcove, pressing himself against a wall covered in Imperial aquilus, the two-headed eagle symbol that marked nearly every surface in the Imperium, though he didn't recognize it yet. His enhanced vision picked up movement in the darkness ahead. They came in formation, 5 figures in black armor trimmed with gold and red. Their armor was Baroque, covered in purity seals and inscriptions that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Each carried a shotgun that looked more like a small cannon, combat shotguns designed to stop something much tougher than an unarmored human. Their helmets were full-face, emotionless masks with red-lensed optics that swept the darkness with methodical precision. Arbites. The Adeptus. Arbites, though Neo had no context for what that meant. In the Imperium, they were judge, jury, and executioner. The iron fist of Imperial law in a galaxy where mercy was a forgotten concept. "Target reported in this sector," one of them said, his voice rendered flat and metallic by his helmet's Vox grill. "Unsanctioned psyker activity. Shoot to maim. The Inquisition wants live specimens when possible." Neo's enhanced hearing caught every word. Psyker. They thought he was something called a psyker. The skeletal man had used the same term with naked terror. Whatever a psyker was in this reality, it was something these armored enforcers hunted with serious firepower. He could run. He was faster than any normal human. His reflexes enhanced by the same process that had made him the one in the Matrix. But where would he go? He didn't know the layout, didn't understand the threats, didn't even know what planet he was on. And there was something else. Something that made him hesitate. When the skeletal man had run, he'd made that gesture across his chest and spoken of damnation. Not arrest, not punishment. Damnation. As if whatever Neo was, whatever he could do, was spiritually dangerous. The lead Arbite stopped, his helmet turning directly toward Neo's hiding spot. Auspex reading, human pattern life sign, elevated stress markers. He raised his combat shotgun. Tertium Arbites, show yourself! Compliance is mandatory. Neo stepped out of the alcove, hands raised. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I just need to understand where I am. You will be processed according to Imperial law, the Arbite said, his voice devoid of emotion. Suspected unsanctioned psyker activity is a Class Omega violation. You will submit to binding and transport to the nearest telepathica facility. Resistance will be met with lethal force. I don't know what a psyker is, Neo said, keeping his voice calm. In the Matrix, he'd learned that understanding your opponent was crucial. These enforcers moved like military, spoke in rigid protocols. There might be room for reason. I'm not from here. I don't know your laws. Ignorance is not innocence, the Arbit replied. It sounded like a mantra, something he'd said 1,000 times before. Kneel. Place your hands behind your head. Any attempt to manifest psychic powers will result in immediate execution. Two of the Arbites moved forward with purpose, pulling out heavy manacles from their belt pouches. The restraints weren't simple metal. They were covered in intricate engravings that seemed to writhe in the dim light, and they hummed with a low frequency that made Neo's teeth ache. He could feel it again, that potential to reach out, to bend reality, to stop these men the way he'd once stopped bullets. But the memory of that scream, of something vast and hungry noticing him, made him hesitate. In the Matrix, using his power had been safe. Here, every instinct told him that warping reality came with a price. Neo knelt. The manacles closed around his wrists with a click, and immediately he felt something change. It was like a circuit breaking, a connection severing. Whatever power he possessed, whatever made him special, was suddenly dampened, not gone, but suppressed beneath layers of something that felt like static and ice. "Hexagrammic wards holding," one of the Arbites reported. "Subject secure." They hauled him to his feet with professional efficiency. No brutality, but no gentleness either. Just cold, mechanical procedure. "What happens now?" Neo asked. The lead Arbite's helmet turned toward him. Behind the red lenses, Neo could see nothing human. "You will be transported to the Black Ship when it arrives. Until then, you will be held in Precinct Fortress 77 Alpha. Pray to the God Emperor for mercy, Psyker. You're going to need it." As they marched him deeper into the Underhive, toward whatever fate awaited him, Neo realized Trinity had been right. The corruption in the Matrix hadn't been random. It had been a trap. Something in this reality had reached across dimensions, recognized what he was, and pulled him here deliberately. The question that terrified him was simple. Why? The Arbite's precinct fortress was a testament to paranoia-made architecture. Neo was processed through 3 separate checkpoints, each one requiring biometric scans, psychic resonance testing, and prayers to the God Emperor spoken by tech priests in mechanical voices. The fortress itself was built into the hive's structure like a tumor. All reinforced adamantium and void-shielded walls designed to contain threats that conventional construction couldn't hold. They stripped him of his black coat and boots, replacing them with a gray prison smock marked with symbols he couldn't read. The hexagrammic manacles stayed on. Every time Neo's mind brushed against that place where his power lived, the wards activated with a sensation like ice water in his veins. It wasn't pain exactly, more like the absence of sensation, a numbing void that spread from the manacles up his arms. His cell was 3 meters by 3 meters, carved from solid rockcrete. A single lumen strip provided sickly yellow light. No windows, no visible surveillance equipment, though he knew he was being watched. The walls were covered in scratched prayers and desperate messages from previous occupants. One caught his attention. "The ship came on the 3rd week. Don't let them take you to Terra. Better to die here." Neo sat on the metal bench that served as a bed and tried to center himself. In the Matrix, meditation had helped him access deeper levels of his abilities. Here, he needed clarity more than power. He needed to understand this reality's operating system before he could hope to navigate it. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss exactly 47 minutes later. His internal sense of time still functioned perfectly. 2 Arbites entered, flanking a figure who made Neo's enhanced perception recoil instinctively. Inquisitor Valerius didn't look like a monster. He was tall and thin, perhaps 50 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a tight knot. He wore a long coat of black leather adorned with the rosette of the Holy Inquisition, a stylized eye surrounded by skulls and inscriptions. His eyes were augmetic, replaced with sophisticated cyber optics that glowed with a soft amber light. When those eyes focused on Neo, it felt like being dissected. "Leave us," Valerius said to the Arbites. His voice was cultured, almost gentle, which somehow made it more disturbing than harsh commands. The Arbites hesitated. "Lord Inquisitor, protocol dictates—" "I am aware of protocol, Proctor Simmons. I wrote half of them." Valerius's smile didn't reach his mechanical eyes. "This prisoner represents no threat to me. Leave us." The Arbites complied, though Neo could sense their reluctance. The door sealed behind them with a heavy clang, leaving Neo alone with a man whose title he didn't understand, but whose authority was absolute. Valerius studied him in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his words made Neo's blood run cold. "You're not from this galaxy, are you?" Neo kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. How could this man possibly know that? Valerius circled him slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "The Telepathica thought you might be a rogue psyker. The Arbites believed you were an underhive mutant, manifesting dangerous abilities. But I've been hunting threats to the Imperium for 37 years. And you—" He paused directly in front of Neo, those augmetic eyes seeming to peer through flesh and bone. "You're something I've never encountered before." "What gave it away?" Neo asked. No point in lying if this man already knew. "Several things. Your biometric scans show gene patterns inconsistent with any known human population. Your brain structure includes augmentation that predates Imperial technology by millennia, or possibly postdates it from a divergent evolutionary path. But most tellingly—" Valerius reached out and tapped the hexagrammic manacles. "These wards are designed to suppress warp-tainted psychers. They're working on you, but your power doesn't come from the Immaterium. It comes from somewhere else entirely." Neo leaned forward slightly. "The Immaterium? The warp, the sea of souls, the realm of chaos." Valerius watched his reaction carefully. "You truly don't know where you are, do you? What you've stumbled into?" "I know I'm not in Kansas anymore," Neo said, then realized the reference would mean nothing here. "I come from a different reality. One where humanity created artificial intelligence that enslaved us. I was special there. I could manipulate the digital reality they'd trapped us in." Valerius's expression shifted. Not quite surprise, but something close. A digital reality. Fascinating. And you could alter it with your mind? More than that. I could see the underlying code, rewrite it, stop bullets in midair, fly. I became something more than human to save my people. And now you're here, trying to apply those same abilities to baseline reality. Valerius's voice took on an edge of urgency. "Stop. Immediately. Do you understand what you're doing when you warp reality in this universe?" Neo shook his head. The Inquisitor pulled a data slate from his coat and activated it. Hololithic images flickered to life above the screen. Grotesque creatures with impossible anatomies. Humans twisted into nightmare shapes. And something that looked like a tear in space itself, leaking colors that shouldn't exist. In your universe, reality was stable, objective. Here, consciousness and reality are entangled through something we call the warp, a dimension of pure psychic energy where thought and emotion become tangible. When psychers use their power, they're channeling warp energy through their will. It's dangerous, often fatal, and attracts predators from the other side. Valerius's mechanical eyes bored into Neo. But you're not a psyker. You're somehow warping reality directly, without using the Immaterium as an intermediary. Do you know what happens when you create tears in reality without proper channeling? Neo thought of that scream, that sensation of something vast noticing him. You create wounds, Valerius continued, holes between dimensions. And in this universe, there are things on the other side that have been waiting billions of years for exactly such openings. Demons, entities of pure malevolence that want nothing more than to pour through into real space and consume everything. The room seemed to grow colder. Neo understood viruses, understood malicious code. But demons? Entities from another dimension? It sounded insane, except he'd felt it. When he'd tried to use his power, something had noticed. Something hungry. So what happens to me now? Neo asked. Valerius deactivated the data slate. That depends entirely on whether you can learn to never use your abilities again. The Black Ship arrives in 2 weeks to transport unsanctioned psychers to Terra for processing. Most don't survive the journey. Those who do face a fate worse than death. Their souls burned as fuel for the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that guides humanity across the galaxy. And if I don't use my power, then you remain an anomaly, a question mark in my files. I don't like question marks. The Inquisitor moved toward the door, then paused. But I also don't like wasting unique assets. You say you saved humanity in your reality. Perhaps you can be useful in ours. We'll see. The door opened. Valerius stepped through, then looked back one final time. Welcome to the Imperium of Man, stranger. We are the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable, spanning 1 million worlds across the galaxy. We practice genocide as policy, burn entire planets to ash, and grind trillions into meat for the war machine. And we do all of this because we have no choice. Remember that when you judge us. The door sealed, leaving Neo alone with thoughts darker than any nightmare the Matrix had ever generated. The Black Ship arrived early. Neo had spent 9 days in the cell. 9 days of contemplation and growing horror as he pieced together the reality of the Imperium from overheard conversations and the ramblings of other prisoners in adjacent cells. 9 days of fighting the urge to reach for his power every time the walls felt too close. Every time the weight of this new universe pressed down on him like a physical force. The prisoners felt it before the guards announced it. A change in pressure, a psychic weight that made the air feel thick and oily. Neo's enhanced senses picked up something else, a wrongness in the fabric of space itself, as if reality was being displaced by something that shouldn't exist in normal dimensions. The screaming started in the lower cells. Prisoners who'd been catatonic suddenly thrashing against their restraints. Others praying frantically, speaking in tongues, clawing at their own flesh. Neo pressed his hands against his temples, feeling a pressure building behind his eyes. Even through the hexagrammic wards, he could sense it. Something massive and terrible sliding through the warp, approaching tertium like a predator drawn to wounded prey. The Arbites moved through the cell blocks with brutal efficiency, dragging prisoners from their cells. Neo heard the distinctive crack of shock mauls and the wet sounds of compliance being enforced. When they came for him, 4 Arbites instead of the usual 2, he didn't resist. The manacles stayed on, supplemented by additional restraints around his ankles and a collar around his neck that hummed with the same reality-dampening frequency. They marched him through corridors he hadn't seen before, deeper into the precinct fortress. Other prisoners shuffled in the same direction. 73 individuals by Neo's count, ranging from children who couldn't be more than 10 years old to ancient men and women who looked like they'd been waiting for this moment their entire lives. All wore the same gray smocks. All had the same haunted look in their eyes. One young woman, perhaps 20, caught Neo's attention. Her eyes were milky white, completely without pupils, and she turned her blind gaze directly toward him as they passed. "You're not like us," she whispered. "You're not touched by the warp. You're something else, something new." Her voice took on a sing-song quality. "The changer of ways is curious about you. So curious, so hungry to know what you are." An arbite struck her across the face with a shock maul. She collapsed without a sound, twitching as electricity coursed through her nervous system. They dragged her forward anyway, her feet leaving trails through the grime on the floor. The procession emerged into a massive embarkation chamber carved from the hive's superstructure. And there, visible through armored viewports, Neo saw the black ship for the first time. It was beautiful in the way a spider is beautiful, all elegant curves and deadly purpose. The ship was kilometers long, painted in absolute black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Gothic architecture covered its hull, spires and buttresses that served no aerodynamic purpose, adorned with chains and skulls and the ever-present Imperial Aquila. But what drew Neo's attention were the symbols etched into its armor. They glowed with a sickly green light, and looking at them too long made his vision swim and his thoughts fragment. Hexagrammic wards, thousands of them, millions. The entire ship was a flying prison designed to contain the most dangerous psychers in the Imperium and transport them across the warp without their powers tearing holes in reality. Magnificent, isn't she? Neo turned to find Inquisitor Valerius standing beside him, hands clasped behind his back as he observed the boarding process. The Inquisitor wore traveling gear now, armor beneath his long coat, and a bolt pistol holstered at his hip. "The Validus Animus. She's been making this run for 3,000 years. The wards in her hull are maintained by an entire convent of Sisters of Silence, pariahs, humans born with no presence in the warp. Their very existence nullifies psychic power." "You're coming with us?" Neo asked. "You're too interesting to let the telepathica process without my supervision." Valerius's mechanical eyes whirred as they focused on something in the distance. "Besides, I have business on Terra. Your arrival simply accelerated my schedule." They were herded onto massive cargo lifters that carried them up to the ship's boarding ramps. Neo felt the change immediately as they crossed the threshold into the black ship proper. The pressure in his head intensified tenfold. The hexagrammic manacles went from cool metal to ice cold, and the dampening effect spread through his entire body. It felt like being submerged in freezing water, every nerve ending screaming in protest even though he wasn't actually cold. Around him, psychers collapsed. Some vomited. Others simply stood rigid, tears streaming down their faces as their powers were crushed beneath the weight of wards so powerful they created a null zone in reality itself. The young woman with milky eyes was convulsing, foam bubbling from her mouth as whatever entity had spoken through her was forcibly severed from her mind. Neo stayed standing through sheer will, but he understood now why the scratched message in his cell had said death was better. This ship was designed to break people, to strip away everything that made them more than baseline human, and transport what remained as cargo. Figures in black armor moved through the prisoners with absolute silence. Sisters of Silence, the pariahs Valerius had mentioned. They were all women, tall and imposing, their armor decorated with symbols of negation and nullification. They wore helmets that completely obscured their faces, and when they passed close to Neo, he felt his very sense of self begin to erode. These weren't just human beings without warp presence. They were anti-psychic, their existence a wound in the fabric of psychic reality. One of them stopped in front of Neo, tilting her head as she studied him. Her helmet bore a rank insignia he didn't recognize. She raised one gauntleted hand and made a series of precise gestures. Sign language. Valerius translated. Sister Superior Kalia says your pattern is wrong. The wards suppress you, but your power doesn't register as warp-based. She's confused. The sisters are never confused. The Sister Superior made more gestures, sharp and aggressive. She says you feel like an absence, like a hole in causality. She wants to know what you are. Neo met the blank stare of her helmet. I'm someone who made a mistake. I touched something I shouldn't have and ended up here. More gestures. Then the Sister Superior turned and walked away. Her silent footsteps somehow more ominous than any sound. You've made an impression, Valerius said quietly. The Sisters of Silence have hunted psychers for 10,000 years. They've seen every variation of warp taint imaginable. For you to confuse them, he paused. We need to talk before we reach Terra. Before you're processed by the telepathica. There are things you need to understand about the Imperium, about the Emperor, about why we're so desperate that we'd burn souls as fuel. The cargo bay doors sealed with a thunderous clang. Through the viewports, Neo watched Tertium Hive begin to recede as the black ship broke orbit. The planet looked diseased from space. Vast hive cities like tumors on the surface, surrounded by wastelands that glowed with toxic runoff. And beyond it, stars. Trillions of stars spread across a galaxy that didn't care about humanity's survival. Neo felt the ship's warp engines engage. Reality shuddered, and for one terrible moment, he saw through the veil between dimensions. The warp was worse than anything the Matrix had ever generated. It was chaos incarnate, a roiling sea of emotions and madness where demons the size of solar systems played games with mortal souls. And somewhere in that nightmare, he felt eyes turn toward him. Old eyes. Patient eyes. Eyes that had been waiting for something new to notice. Then the wards reasserted themselves, and the vision cut off. Neo sagged in his restraints, suddenly understanding exactly what Trinity's warning had meant. The corruption hadn't tasted like screaming because it was damaged code. It had tasted like screaming because it was a window into the warp, and something in the warp had recognized what Neo was. A being who could alter reality without touching that hellish dimension. A being whose very existence violated the rules of this universe. They didn't want to kill him. They wanted to use him. Or worse, to learn from him how to break reality without consequences. Neo closed his eyes and did something he hadn't done since becoming the One. He prayed. Not to the God Emperor whose name was everywhere in this nightmare future, but to whatever force in the multiverse had brought him here. If this was a test, he was going to pass it. If this was a trap, he'd find the way out. He'd saved humanity once. Maybe he could do it again. But first, he needed to survive the journey to Terra. And in the warp, survival was never guaranteed. The journey through the warp should have taken 6 weeks. Neo learned this from whispered conversations between Arbite's guards, who didn't realize his enhanced hearing could pick up their words through bulkheads. 6 weeks of traveling through a dimension where time and space meant nothing, where demons pressed against the ship's Geller fields like sharks circling wounded prey. where the only thing standing between the passengers and madness were ancient wards and the soul-crushing presence of the Sisters of Silence. They were 3 days into the journey when Inquisitor Valerius summoned Neo to his quarters. The Inquisitor's chambers were Spartan by any standard. A bed, a desk, walls lined with books and data slates, and a small shrine to the God Emperor featuring a golden aquila and perpetually burning candles. But what dominated the room was a massive viewing port, currently shuttered with adamantium plates 3 feet thick. Even sealed, Neo could feel something pressing against them from the other side. The warp, trying to find a way in. Valerius sat at his desk, studying a hololithic display that showed Neo's biometric data in intricate detail. The Inquisitor looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from decades of carrying impossible burdens. He gestured to a chair across from him. "Sit. We need to talk about what you saw when we translated to the warp." Neo sat, the hexagrammic collar around his neck making his movements stiff. "I saw hell. Literal, actual hell." Close enough. Valerius deactivated the display and leaned back. The warp is the collective unconsciousness of every sentient being in the galaxy given form and substance. Every emotion, every thought, every dream and nightmare has been feeding it for billions of years, and in that sea of madness, things evolved. The Chaos Gods, entities so vast and terrible that their mere attention can drive entire worlds insane. The young woman, the one with white eyes. She said something about the changer of ways being curious about me. Valerius's expression darkened. Tzinch, the chaos god of change, scheming, and ambition. If he's taken an interest in you... The Inquisitor stood and paced to the shuttered viewport, one hand resting on his bolt pistol as if the weapon could provide comfort. In your universe, you manipulated a digital reality. Here, you're warping baseline reality itself. Do you understand how unprecedented that is? How dangerous? Your Sister Superior said I feel like an absence, a hole in causality. Because you're not drawing power from the warp. You're somehow imposing your will directly onto reality without using the immaterium as a medium. Valerius turned to face him. Psychers are dangerous because they're doorways, conduits through which warp energy flows. But you're something else entirely. You're editing reality's source code without opening any doors. In theory, that should be impossible. Neo felt a chill run down his spine. But if the Chaos Gods noticed me, then they want to understand how you do it. Tzinch especially. He's obsessed with knowledge, with new possibilities, with schemes that span millennia. A being who can alter reality without touching the warp? That's the kind of puzzle that would fascinate him. Valerius's mechanical eyes whirred. It's also the kind of prize that would start a war among the Chaos Gods themselves. So what do? I can't use my power without risking... what? Possession? Corruption? Worse than possession. The Inquisitor returned to his desk and pulled out a crystal data core, slotting it into a reader. A hololithic image appeared. A planet, once green and beautiful, now a nightmare of impossible architecture and screaming geometry. This was Secundus Prime. 20 million inhabitants. One man, a tech priest experimenting with non-warp-based reality manipulation. He succeeded for approximately 7 seconds before he created a hole in causality large enough for demons to pour through. The entire planet was consumed by the warp. That was 5 years ago. The hole is still growing. Neo stared at the image, watching as impossible structures twisted and reformed, as colors that shouldn't exist bled across the planet's surface. 7 seconds. You've already used your power multiple times. Brief flickers, yes, but each one was a tiny wound in reality. The only reason you haven't caused a catastrophic breach is that you stopped immediately when you felt the pressure. Your instincts saved you. Valerius leaned forward. But here's what concerns me. You were pulled here deliberately. Something reached across dimensional barriers, recognized what you were, and dragged you into this universe. Why? Neo thought back to that moment in the Matrix, when he'd touched the corrupted code. The sensation of something vast on the other side, waiting and watching. It felt patient, like it had been planning this for a long time. Tzeentch is known as the Great Schemer. His plans operate on timescales that mortal minds can't comprehend. If he orchestrated your arrival, Valerius's expression was grim. Then we're playing a game whose rules we don't understand, and every move we make might be exactly what he wants. A klaxon suddenly blared throughout the ship. 3 short bursts followed by a long wail. Valerius was on his feet instantly, his bolt pistol drawn. Warp breach alarm! Something's trying to get through the Geller fields. The lights flickered. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Neo felt it through the dampening wards, a presence pressing against the ship's hull, probing for weaknesses, searching for something specific, searching for him. "It's me," Neo said. Standing despite the weight of the collar, "Whatever's out there, it's looking for me." Valerius moved to a Vox unit on the wall and opened a channel. "Bridge, this is Inquisitor Valerius. What's our status?" The response came through heavy with static and something else. Whispers beneath the words, voices speaking in languages that predated human civilization. Multiple warp entities attempting to breach the Geller field envelope. Pattern is unusual. They're not attacking aggressively. They're examining us. Sister Superior Kalia reports psychic pressure focused on the cargo holds where the prisoners are kept. Seal all sections. Triple the sister presence around the... Valerius stopped mid-sentence, his augmetic eyes widening. Emperor's throne. They're not trying to break in. They're trying to communicate. Neo felt it too. The presence pressing against the hull wasn't violent. It was curious, probing. He could sense something trying to establish contact. Not through the warp, but through that same channel his power used. Through reality itself. And then, impossibly, he heard a voice. Not in his ears. Not even in his mind. It spoke in the space between possibilities, in the quantum foam where reality decided what form to take. Neo of the Matrix, the one who sees code, the anomaly who saved his world. The voice was vast, containing multitudes. It spoke with 1,000 tongues simultaneously, each one whispering different variations of the same message. You have been brought here for a purpose. Your power is the key to a lock that has remained sealed since the birth of this galaxy. Valerius grabbed Neo's shoulder. Don't respond. Don't engage. That's a choice approaches, the voice continued, ignoring the Inquisitor entirely. Just as you chose between pills in your previous reality, you will choose again. But this choice will determine the fate of trillions. Images flooded Neo's perception, not through his eyes, but directly into his consciousness. He saw Terra, the throne world of humanity, saw the golden throne, and sitting upon it, a corpse that had been technically alive for 10,000 years. The God Emperor of mankind, sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers every day. His consciousness spread so thin across the galaxy that he was more concept than being. And Neo understood. He finally understood why he'd been brought here. "You want me to free him," Neo whispered. "You want me to use my power to alter the reality of the Golden Throne, to do what no psyker could do without destroying Terra in the process. The corpse god prevents change. His light holds back the inevitable. But you..." The presence seemed to press closer, eager. "You can edit reality without opening doors. You can free him without shattering the barriers that keep demons from flooding into reality. You can end the stagnation." "And what happens to humanity when the Emperor dies?" Valerius demanded, his voice carrying the weight of faith and fury. "The Astronomicon fails. 1 trillion ships are lost in the warp. Thousands of worlds go dark. The Imperium collapses. How many die in the chaos? Quadrillions?" "Change requires sacrifice," the voice responded. "Stagnation is death. The Imperium has been dying for 10,000 years. It's time to let it evolve into something new." The pressure suddenly released. The temperature returned to normal. The whispers faded, leaving only silence and the steady thrum of the ship's engines. Neo realized he was shaking. Valerius still gripped his shoulder, the Inquisitor's face pale beneath his augmetic implants. "That was Tzeentch," Valerius said quietly. "Or a piece of him. Or something speaking with his voice. And he just revealed his plan." The Inquisitor's hand tightened. "He brought you here to kill the Emperor, to end the Imperium, to plunge humanity into an age of change and evolution that will feed him for millennia." Neo met his gaze. "So what do we do?" "We reach Terra. We bring you before the Emperor himself, and we pray that the Master of Mankind has a plan." Valerius released him and returned to his desk, suddenly looking every one of his years. "Because if he doesn't, then we're all pieces in a game we've already lost." The Navigator's sanctum was forbidden to all but the most trusted crew. Neo learned this as Sister Superior Kalia escorted him through the Black Ship's upper decks, Inquisitor Valerius following close behind. The sister moved in complete silence, her anti-psychic presence creating a bubble of null space that made Neo's dampened power feel even more distant. Other crew members pressed themselves against the walls as they passed, making the sign of the Aquila and averting their eyes. The sanctum door was circular, 3 meters in diameter, covered in more hexagrammic wards than Neo had seen anywhere else on the ship. Valerius placed his palm against a scanner, and machinery older than Terra's oldest civilizations ground into motion. The door spiraled open like an aperture, revealing a chamber that defied the ship's utilitarian design. The room was a sphere, walls lined with charts that seemed to shift and change when viewed peripherally. At the center, suspended in a meditation throne wrapped with cables and psychic dampeners, sat the Navigator. She was ancient, centuries old, kept alive by Juvenat treatments and augmetic life support. Her third eye, the warp eye that allowed her to perceive the immaterium and guide ships through its madness, was covered by an ornate golden seal inscribed with the Emperor's own wards. "Navigator Secundus Althea," Valerius said formally. I've brought the anomaly as you requested." The navigator's withered hand made a gesture, and her throne rotated to face them. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through ancient ruins. "Leave us, Inquisitor. The pariah may stay. Her presence helps me remain grounded." Valerius hesitated, then bowed and departed. The door sealed behind him with a finality that made Neo's enhanced hearing pick up the multiple locking mechanisms engaging. He was alone with the navigator and the silent sister. "Come closer, child of another reality." Althea's regular eyes, milky with age, somehow focused on him with disturbing accuracy. "I wish to see what the great ocean showed me during our breach." Neo approached cautiously. "The great ocean?" "The warp, the Imperium, the sea of souls." A rattling laugh. "We have many names for the hell we must sail through. But you're not from a universe that has such a thing, are you? In your reality, consciousness and matter were separate, clean. Here, they're entangled in ways that make existence itself a form of torment." "Tzeentch spoke to me," Neo said. "He wants me to—" "I know what he wants." Althea's throne drifted closer, cables trailing like synthetic entrails. "I've been a navigator for 347 years. I've seen the tides of the warp shift with wars and births of gods. I've witnessed demons the size of continents and psychic storms that consumed entire sectors. But in all my years, I've never seen the warp react to something the way it reacted to you." She gestured, and hololithic displays flickered to life around them. They showed the ship's passage through the warp, except instead of the normal turbulent flow of psychic energy, there was a wake. Everywhere the ship traveled, the warp parted around Neo's presence like water around a stone, leaving trails of disturbed causality that glowed with colors that had no names. "You're not invisible to the warp," Althea explained. "You're antithetical to it. Your very existence creates small zones of stable reality in a dimension where stability shouldn't exist. The demons can sense these zones. They're drawn to them like moths to flame, but they can't enter them. You're a walking paradox, simultaneously visible and untouchable." Neo studied the displays, his mind racing through implications. "So when I use my power, you expand those zones. You impose stable reality onto a dimension of pure chaos. For a moment, you create pockets of space where the warp itself cannot exist." Althea's third eye twitched beneath its seal, as if trying to open. "Do you understand what that means? What you could do if you learned to control it? I could hurt the Chaos Gods. More than hurt. You could wound them. Really wound them. In ways that no weapon in this universe can." The navigator's expression was unreadable. "But there's a problem. A terrible problem that Tzeentch didn't mention when he spoke to you." Sister Superior Kalia made a sharp gesture, and Neo saw Valerius's translation device wasn't here. But somehow, he understood the sister's meaning anyway. She was warning him that what came next would change everything. Althea continued. "Your power doesn't draw from the warp, but it must draw from somewhere. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. In your universe, you drew power from... what? The Matrix itself?" Neo nodded slowly. "The digital reality. I was part of its code. Using my abilities was like a program accessing system resources. And here, you're trying to access resources from..." The navigator gestured at the displays. "Baseline reality itself. The quantum substrate of the universe. The fundamental laws of physics. You're not bending reality. You're borrowing energy from reality's own structure to enforce your will. Understanding crashed over Neo like a wave. And every time I do that, I'm weakening reality itself. Not weakening, spending, like burning fuel. Althea's throne drifted even closer. The universe has enormous reserves, yes, but they're not infinite. And here's what truly terrifies me. I've been monitoring your presence since you boarded this ship. Even while dormant, even while fully suppressed by wards and pariahs, you're causing micro-fluctuations in local reality. Tiny expenditures of cosmic energy just to exist in a universe that wasn't designed to accommodate you. Neo felt his hands clench. How long? Until what? Until you've drained enough reality structure that catastrophic failure occurs? Althea's laugh was bitter. Centuries, perhaps. Millennia if you never use your active abilities. But if you start manifesting power regularly, if you try to do something on the scale Tzeentch wants, altering the Emperor's state on the Golden Throne, she shook her head. You might tear a hole in reality large enough to swallow the entire Sol system. The sphere chamber suddenly felt much smaller. Neo looked at Sister Superior Kalia, who nodded slowly, confirming the navigator's assessment. But Tzeentch knew this, Neo said quietly. He knew what would happen. He still wants me to try. Of course he does. The Chaos Gods don't care about destroying reality. They exist partially outside it. If you shattered causality trying to free the Emperor, it would create warp rifts that would feed them for eons. And if you succeeded... Althea gestured at the displays, which now showed Terra, the throne world, heart of the Imperium. The Emperor dying would achieve the same result through different means. Tzeentch wins either way. Neo felt the trap closing around him. This was worse than the Matrix. At least there, he'd had clear enemies and allies. Here, every choice led to catastrophe. So I do nothing? He asked. I let the wards suppress me forever? Live out whatever lifespan I have while reality slowly bleeds energy to sustain my existence? There may be another option. Althea's throne rotated, showing him a different display. This one featuring the Golden Throne itself, a massive machine that dwarfed the God Emperor sitting within it. The throne is a device of immense power, built during humanity's dark age of technology. It manipulates reality on a quantum level to sustain the Emperor's psychic projection across the galaxy. Its mechanisms are similar to what you do, just orders of magnitude larger. You think I could interface with it? I think you might be compatible with it in ways no human psyker could be. Psykers channel warp energy. The throne regulates baseline reality. You're a bridge between those two states. The navigator's expression was grave. But this is speculation. Dangerous speculation. I'm a navigator, not a tech priest or a biomancer. I navigate the warp. I don't pretend to understand the deepest mysteries of the universe. Sister Superior Kalia made more gestures, urgent and insistent. Neo looked at her. What's she saying? Althea translated. She says the Emperor will know. When we reach Terra, when you're brought before the Golden Throne, the Master of Mankind will understand what you are and what you represent. He's been guiding humanity for 40,000 years. If there's a way to use your abilities without destroying reality, he'll see it. And if there isn't? The navigator's silence was answer enough. A vox chime interrupted the moment. Althea activated the communication channel. Sanctum! Navigator, this is the bridge. The officer's voice was tense. We're approaching the Mandeville point for Terra translation. We should arrive at the Sol system in 6 hours, but... A pause. We're detecting unusual warp currents. It's as if something is trying to push us off course, or pull us somewhere else. Althea's third eye twitched violently beneath its seal. Throne of Terra! They're not done with us! She looked at Neo. Return to your cell. Stay near the Sisters of Silence. Don't think about your power. Don't dream about it. Don't even remember what it felt like to use it. The next 6 hours will determine whether we reach Terra or end up lost in the warp for eternity. Neo moved toward the door, but paused. The thing that spoke to me. Tzeentch. He said I'd have to make a choice. Just like in the Matrix. Red pill or blue pill. What do you think he meant? Althea's expression was ancient and sad. In your old reality, the red pill showed you truth and the blue pill offered comfortable ignorance. Here, she gestured at the displays showing the Imperium in all its cruel glory. Worlds burning, billions dying, an empire built on suffering and sacrifice. Here, both pills are poison. The only question is which poison kills slower. The door opened, and Sister Superior Kalia led Neo back into the corridor. As they walked, he felt the ship shudder, not physically, but dimensionally, as if something vast was pressing against the Geller fields with increasing pressure. Something that knew exactly where he was. Something that had plans within plans within plans. Something that had been waiting 10,000 years for a piece to appear on the board that could finally change the game. And Neo realized with cold certainty that everything, the corrupted code in the Matrix, his arrival in Tertium, the Black Ship, even this conversation, had all been choreographed by an intelligence that operated on timescales he couldn't comprehend. Tzeentch hadn't just brought him here. The Chaos God had been preparing this moment since before Neo was born. Maybe since before Earth itself existed. The question was, could Neo find a move that wasn't part of the plan? The Mechanicus delegation arrived 3 hours before the Black Ship reached Terra's orbit. Their boarding craft was a thing of brutal efficiency, all red robes and chrome augmetics, accompanied by combat servitors whose organic parts looked barely human anymore. Neo watched through a viewing port as they docked with the precision of machines, which was appropriate considering most of them were more machine than flesh. Inquisitor Valerius met him outside his cell, his expression grim. The Fabricator General received word of your arrival. He's sending a research team to examine you before the Emperor does. He paused. This is highly irregular. The Mechanicus rarely oversteps inquisitorial authority, but your nature apparently justifies the breach. What do they want? To understand how you work, to quantify the impossible. The Adeptus Mechanicus worships the Omnissiah, the machine god they believe is an aspect of the Emperor. But their true faith is in knowledge itself. Valerius's mechanical eyes whirred. A being who can manipulate reality without touching the warp? That's the kind of discovery that starts tech heresies and schisms within their ranks. The delegation was led by Magos Dominus Krevan, a figure who'd replaced so much of himself with machinery that calling him human was generous. His robes were crimson, adorned with the cog skull symbol of the Mechanicus. His voice emanated from a vox grill in his chest, rendered flat and emotionless by processing algorithms. When he looked at Neo, his augmetic eyes cycled through spectrums of light that human eyes couldn't perceive. Subject designated Neo Anomalous 01, Krevan stated, his binary cant creating a secondary layer of communication that Neo's enhanced hearing picked up as rapid clicking. Authorization Epsilon 77 grants the Mechanicus primary investigation rights. You will submit to non-invasive scanning protocols. And if I refuse? Neo asked. Krevan's head tilted at an angle no human neck could achieve. Refusal is illogical. Understanding serves the Omnissiah. You represent a mechanical impossibility, consciousness affecting baseline reality without intermediary apparatus. Such knowledge must be preserved and studied. Valerius stepped forward. Magos, the subject is under inquisitorial protection until his audience with the Emperor. Your scans may proceed, but any invasive procedures require my explicit authorization. Acknowledged. Krevan made a gesture, and servitors wheeled forward a device that looked like a combination of medical scanner and torture implement. Subject will stand within the resonance field. Procedure duration, 47 minutes. Discomfort probability, minimal. Neo looked at Valerius, who nodded. Not much choice in the matter. He stepped into the marked circle, and the device activated with a hum that made his teeth ache. Beams of light, visible and otherwise, played across his body. He could feel them penetrating deeper, scanning bone structure, neural pathways, the quantum state of his cells. Krevan observed the data streaming across multiple hololithic displays, his augmetic appendages making adjustments too fast for human eyes to track. Fascinating. Gene structure shows markers inconsistent with evolutionary patterns in this galaxy. Neural augmentation utilizes organic-synthetic integration unknown to current Mechanicus databases. Subject's brain demonstrates quantum entanglement patterns that should not be possible in biological tissue. Meaning? Valerius asked. Meaning the subject's consciousness exists partially in quantum superposition. His brain is simultaneously processing multiple probability states, collapsing them into singular reality through active observation and will. Krevan moved closer to the displays. In effect, he perceives reality at a more fundamental level than baseline humans. He sees the quantum foam, the substrate where reality determines its form. And somehow, he's learned to influence that determination process. Neo felt a chill despite the warmth of the scanning beams. That description was eerily accurate. In the Matrix, he'd learned to see code, the underlying structure of digital reality. Here, he was doing something similar, just with the actual quantum mechanics of the universe. But there's an anomaly, Krevan continued, his vox grill crackling with what might have been excitement. Scanning reveals micro-fluctuations in local space-time geometry centered on the subject. The effect is subtle, measured in femtometers, but consistent. The subject is causing reality to bend around him. Not through force or energy expenditure, but through what can only be described as informational pressure. Explain, Valerius demanded. Krevan's mechanical fingers danced across a haptic interface, bringing up a new display showing Neo's body surrounded by warped space-time. Reality operates on information processing at the quantum level. The subject somehow interfaces with this level directly. He's essentially convincing reality to conform to his expectations, not through psychic power, but through direct manipulation of probability states. Like talking to reality instead of forcing it. Neo said quietly. Affirmative. A crude analogy, but functionally accurate. Krevan moved around the scanning field, viewing Neo from multiple angles. However, Navigator Althea's assessment was correct. This process has an energetic cost. The subject is borrowing energy from vacuum fluctuations, the quantum foam itself. Small amounts, but measurable. Prolonged existence in this universe, even without active power usage, will eventually create localized entropy increases. Valerius's expression darkened. How long? Current expenditure rate suggests no catastrophic failure for approximately 7,000 standard years. However, active power usage increases expenditure exponentially. Kravan pulled up another display, this one showing projections. A sustained manifestation of power, equivalent to his reported abilities in his native universe, would drain sufficient energy to create a cascade failure in local space-time within 17 minutes. Cascade failure, Neo repeated. You mean a hole in reality? Affirmative. A breach in the quantum substrate large enough to allow uncontrolled warp incursion. Estimated demon manifestation within 0.7 seconds of breach formation. Estimated casualties. Sol system total population loss within 48 hours. The room fell silent, except for the hum of machinery and the soft clicking of Kravan's binary transmissions. So I'm a bomb, Neo said. A walking reality-warping bomb that could destroy the entire heart of the Imperium if I sneeze wrong. Inaccurate. Involuntary biological functions do not trigger power manifestation. Kravan's head tilted again. But voluntary power usage does present significant risk. Recommendation: subject should be terminated immediately to prevent potential catastrophic failure. No, Valeria said sharply. He's to be brought before the Emperor. Those are orders from the Senatorum Imperialis itself. Orders noted. However, logic dictates the Emperor's will supersedes logic, Magos. Valerius's hand rested on his bolt pistol. Or have you forgotten the hierarchy of authority? Kravan went still, his various augmetic systems whirring through calculations. Finally, acknowledged. Subject will be delivered to the Golden Throne as specified. However, the Mechanicus formally registers objection to this course of action. Probability models suggest 73% chance of catastrophic outcome. What's the other 27%? Neo asked. Kravan's optical sensors focused on him with uncomfortable intensity. Unknown variables. The Emperor is the greatest unknown variable in all predictive models. His understanding of physics, warpcraft, and consciousness manipulation exceeds all recorded knowledge. If any entity in this universe can find a solution to your existence... The Magos paused, and for the first time, Neo detected something like uncertainty in the mechanical voice. If any entity can, it would be him. The scanning completed with a final pulse of light. Neo stepped out of the field, feeling strangely vulnerable. He'd just been dissected at the quantum level, his very existence quantified and measured and found to be an existential threat. One more thing, Kravan said, pulling up a final display. During the scan, I detected trace energy signatures consistent with dimensional breach mechanics. The subject was transported to this universe approximately 14 standard days ago. Analysis of residual quantum disturbance suggests the breach was not random. We already knew that, Valerius said. Sage orchestrated his arrival. Partially correct. Kravan magnified the data. The breach was facilitated by warp entities, yes, but it was initiated from the subject's side. Something in his universe reached out first. Something that wanted him here, in this specific reality, at this specific time. Neo felt his blood run cold. The anomaly. The corrupted code I touched in the Matrix. Describe it, Kravan demanded. It was spreading through our systems. Corruption that wasn't binary, wasn't quantum. It existed in multiple places simultaneously. Trinity said it tasted like screaming. Neo's enhanced memory replayed the moment with perfect clarity. And when I touched it, it touched back, like it had been waiting for me. Kravan's binary transmissions increased in speed and urgency. After a moment, he spoke. Theory. The subject was not randomly selected. He was identified and specifically targeted by entities in this universe who could perceive across dimensional barriers. His abilities made him valuable. His existence as the one in his reality made him recognizable. And most importantly, the Magos leaned forward. His connection to both digital and biological consciousness made him a perfect bridge. Bridge to what? Valerius asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. To the Omnissiah, to the Machine God, to the Emperor himself. Kravan gestured at the data surrounding them. The Golden Throne is a device that interfaces consciousness with cosmic machinery. The Emperor has sat upon it for 10,000 years, his mind spread across the galaxy, maintaining the Astronomicon through sheer will. But the throne is failing. Its mechanisms degrade despite all efforts to maintain them. Understanding crashed over Neo like a tsunami. They need me to fix it, not to destroy the Emperor, to save him. But Tzeentch suggested the opposite, Valerius interjected. He wanted Neo to free the Emperor, to end his suffering and plunge the Imperium into chaos. Tzeentch is the god of change and deception, Kravan stated. He would offer the subject a choice that appears binary, but serves his purposes regardless of outcome. Free the Emperor. The Imperium falls. Warp rifts consume Terra. Tzeentch feeds on the chaos. Save the Emperor. The subject must interface with the Golden Throne, must use his reality-warping abilities on a massive scale, potentially creating the very cascade failure I calculated earlier. Either choice serves Tzeentch. Unless there's a third option, Neo said quietly. There's always a third option. I proved that in the Matrix when I chose to sacrifice myself instead of fighting or fleeing. Kravan's optical sensors cycled through several spectrums. Your previous solution involved voluntary death and subsequent resurrection through machine intervention. Probability of similar outcome in this scenario, 0.03%. I don't plan to die again, Neo said, but I'm also not going to play Tzeentch's game by his rules. The ship shuddered, not from external force, but from something deeper. Through the walls, Neo felt Terra's presence. The throne world of humanity, the heart of the Imperium, the most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy. And somewhere on its surface, buried beneath mountains of architecture and faith, sat the God Emperor on his golden throne, waiting. We've entered Terra's orbit, Valerius said, checking a data slate. The custodian guard has been notified of our arrival. You'll be transferred to the Imperial Palace within the hour. Neo looked at his hands, thinking about all the times he'd used his power to save people in the Matrix. All the times he'd bent reality to his will, confident that he was doing the right thing. Here, using that same power could kill billions, could tear holes in reality itself, could serve the very evil he'd been fighting against. But not using it might doom humanity to slow extinction as the Golden Throne failed and the Emperor's light finally guttered out. Red pill or blue pill. Except here, both were poison. He needed to find the third option. The choice that wasn't part of Tzeentch's plan. And he had less than an hour to figure out what that might be. Terra was beautiful in the way a weapon is beautiful. All function and terrible purpose. Neo watched through reinforced viewports as the black ship descended toward the throne world, and what he saw defied comprehension. The entire planet was one massive city, layered upon itself in millennia of construction. Hive spires reached into the upper atmosphere while the lowest levels disappeared into darkness that had known no natural light since before recorded history. The Imperial Palace dominated the northern hemisphere, a mountain range of gold and marble that could be seen from orbit, crowned by the Astronomicon itself, a psychic beacon so powerful it blazed in dimensions beyond normal space. But beneath the grandeur, Neo's enhanced perception detected something else: decay. The planet was dying, slowly but inexorably. Its atmosphere was maintained by ancient machines whose mechanisms no one truly understood anymore, and its oceans had been replaced by chemical slurries. Its core had been tapped for geothermal power so extensively that seismic stabilizers were required to prevent catastrophic collapse. Terra was a monument to humanity's refusal to die, even at the cost of consuming itself. "First time seeing the throne world?" Valerius asked, standing beside him as the ship entered final approach vectors. "It's horrible," Neo said quietly. "And magnificent. And horrible again. That's the Imperium in summary." The Inquisitor's mechanical eyes reflected the golden light of the palace below. "We commit atrocities that would make devils weep. We sacrifice billions without hesitation. We've created a civilization so brutal that mercy is considered weakness. And we do it all because the alternative is extinction. Not just death. Extinction. The complete erasure of humanity from a universe that wants us dead." The ship touched down in a landing bay so massive it could have held a dozen black ships. Custodian guard were waiting, 10,000 of them by Neo's count, arranged in perfect formation. These were not space marines, not even Grey Knights. These were the Emperor's personal guardians, each one a work of art in gene-crafted perfection, clad in golden armor that made them look like demigods of ancient myth. Their guardian spears crackled with power fields, and their eyes, visible through ornate helmets, held an intelligence and awareness that marked them as far more than mere soldiers. Sister Superior Kalia led Neo down the boarding ramp, with Valerius and Magos Cravan following. The moment Neo's feet touched Terra's surface, he felt it. A presence so vast it made the planet itself feel small. The Emperor. Even from kilometers away, buried beneath the palace, the God Emperor's psychic weight pressed down on everything. It wasn't malevolent, but it was overwhelming. Like standing at the base of a mountain and trying to comprehend its totality. A single custodian stepped forward. His armor was more ornate than the others, marked with honors and campaign badges from wars that predated the Imperium itself. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "I am Tribune Valoris, Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. The anomaly will accompany me to the Sanctum Imperialis. All others will remain here." "Tribune, I must protest," Valerius began. "As the Inquisitor responsible for your protest is noted and dismissed." Valoris's gaze never left Neo. The Emperor wishes to see this one alone. No pariahs, no witnesses, no recording devices. Just the anomaly and the master of mankind. Neo felt his heart rate increase. Alone with the Emperor. With a being who'd orchestrated human civilization for 40,000 years, who'd fought gods and won, who'd sacrificed everything to keep humanity alive. A being who'd been sitting on a failing throne in endless agony for 10,000 years. "I'll go," Neo said before Valerius could protest further. Sister Superior Kalia made urgent gestures, but Valoris shook his head. "Even pariahs cannot enter the sanctum. The Emperor's radiance would destroy them. Only those with psychic resistance, or in this case..." He studied Neo with eyes that saw far too much. "Those who exist partially outside standard reality can withstand his presence." The hexagrammic collar and manacles were removed. For the first time since his capture, Neo felt his power unfettered. It surged within him like a tidal wave held back by will alone. The temptation to use it, to stretch his senses and understand this new environment, was overwhelming. But he remembered Navigator Althea's warning: 17 minutes of sustained use before cascade failure, before he'd tear reality apart and doom billions. He clenched his fists and kept the power contained. Valorous led him through corridors that defied architecture. The walls were covered in murals depicting humanity's history, from old Earth to the dark age of technology, to the age of strife, to the Great Crusade, to the current age of decay. Every few hundred meters, they passed through security checkpoints that made the Arbite's fortress look primitive. Servitor brains ran constant scans. Auto-sanctified turrets tracked their movement with weapons that could level buildings. And everywhere, always, the Golden Custodian stood watch with eternal vigilance. "You know what's expected of you?" Valorous asked as they descended deeper into the palace. "I'm supposed to save the Emperor, or kill him, depending on who you ask. The Emperor will tell you what he requires. Your task is to listen and understand." Valorous paused before a massive door inscribed with so many wards and seals that looking at them made Neo's enhanced vision blur. "But I will tell you this. He has been waiting for you. For 10,000 years, he has held off death through will alone. He has guided humanity from the Golden Throne while his body rots and his soul fragments. And through all that torment, he has never stopped planning. Never stopped preparing for possibilities that won't manifest for millennia. You think he knew I was coming? The Emperor knows many things. Whether he specifically anticipated you or simply prepared for all contingencies." Valorous placed his hand on the door. "That's beyond my understanding. I am a warrior, not a prophet. I follow orders and protect humanity. What you are, what you represent, what you might do, those are questions for beings far wiser than me." The door opened, and Neo felt the full weight of the Emperor's presence crash over him like a psychic tsunami. His knees buckled, and only years of training in the Matrix kept him upright. This wasn't malice. It was simply scale. The God Emperor's consciousness was spread across an entire galaxy, and even the tiny fraction focused on this room was more than any human mind was designed to process. "Go," Valorous said, his voice distant through the roaring in Neo's ears. "Face the master of mankind, and pray he has answers, because if he doesn't, we're all damned." Neo stepped through the doorway into golden light so brilliant it should have been blinding, but somehow wasn't. The Sanctum Imperialis was a cathedral of impossible dimensions, and at its center sat the Golden Throne, a machine the size of a building, covered in tubes and wires and mechanisms that pulsed with energies that made Neo's power sense recoil. Psychic energy, biological processors, reality anchors, temporal stabilizers. It was a device that touched every aspect of physics and bent them all to one singular purpose: keeping one man alive and conscious across impossible distances. And sitting in the throne, connected by 10,000 wires to 10,000 systems, barely visible beneath layers of life support and preservation fields, was the Emperor himself. Neo couldn't look directly at him. Not because of brightness, but because his enhanced perception kept trying to process what it was seeing and failing. The Emperor existed on multiple levels simultaneously: physical body, psychic presence, conceptual being. He was a man. He was a god. He was an idea. He was all of these things at once, and the cognitive dissonance of perceiving such an impossible existence made Neo's enhanced brain hurt. But through it all, through the layers of divinity and power and sacrifice, Neo saw something he hadn't expected. Pain. Endless, infinite pain. The Emperor had been suffering for 10,000 years, and every second of that suffering was written across whatever remained of his withered features. And then, impossibly, the Emperor spoke. Not with a voice. His physical form was long past such mundane communication, but directly into Neo's mind, in a way that somehow didn't feel like invasion, but invitation. "Hello, Neo. I've been waiting for you." The words resonated through dimensions, carrying weight that bent reality itself. And Neo realized with sudden clarity that this conversation would determine the fate of trillions. The game was about to enter its final phase. And for the first time since arriving in this nightmare universe, Neo felt something he'd thought lost: hope. Not because he believed everything would be fine, but because he finally understood that he wasn't alone in this fight. The Emperor had been planning this moment for millennia, and whatever happened next, it would be a choice made with full understanding of the consequences: red pill or blue pill. Except now, Neo was finally going to learn what the third option actually was. The Emperor's mind was vast beyond comprehension, but within that vastness, Neo found something unexpected: focus. A singular attention that cut through 10,000 years of diffused consciousness like a laser through fog. For this moment, the God Emperor had pulled fragments of himself back from across the galaxy to concentrate on one conversation. And the effort required was visible in the way reality itself seemed to strain around the Golden Throne. "You understand what Tzeentch wants." The Emperor's voice resonated, not as sound, but as pure meaning transmitted directly into consciousness. "He showed you the obvious choice. Free me from this prison. End my suffering. Let the Imperium collapse into glorious change that will feed him for eons." Neo nodded, not trusting his voice yet. The pressure in the sanctum was immense, not hostile, but demanding, like standing in the presence of a star. "And you understand what the Mechanicus fears, that using your power to save me, to repair the throne, will drain sufficient energy from reality's substrate to cause cascade failure. 17 minutes of sustained manifestation before Sol system erasure." Kravan was very specific with his calculations. Neo managed to say. Something like amusement rippled through the psychic pressure. The Mechanicus excels at calculation, but they calculate based on known variables. You, Neo of the Matrix, are not a known variable. You are something new, something this universe was not designed to accommodate. The Emperor's attention shifted, and Neo felt layers of perception he hadn't known he possessed activate. Suddenly, he could see the Golden Throne, not as a physical object, but as a conceptual structure, a machine that operated on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Psychic circuits channeled the Emperor's will across the galaxy. Biological processors filtered the sacrificed souls of 1,000 psychers daily, converting their deaths into sustainable energy. Reality anchors kept the Emperor's fragmented consciousness from dispersing entirely. And beneath it all, a framework of technology so advanced it bordered on supernatural, built during humanity's lost golden age. But everywhere Neo looked, he saw decay. Systems failing, connections degrading. The throne was dying, and no amount of maintenance could stop it. The Mechanicus had been fighting a losing battle for 10,000 years, and they knew it. "How long?" Neo asked, unconsciously mimicking the Emperor's method of communication. 500 years. Perhaps 600 if the Mechanicus performs miracles. Then the throne fails completely. I die. The Astronomicon goes dark. The Imperium fragments. Humanity's long extinction begins. A pause, heavy with millennia of calculation. Unless someone can fix what the Mechanicus cannot. Someone like me? Someone exactly like you. The Emperor's presence intensified, and Neo saw himself through those ancient eyes, a being who manipulated reality through direct interface with quantum probability states, a consciousness that existed partially outside standard causality, a bridge between the digital and biological, the possible and actual. You were not pulled here randomly, Neo. Tzeentch orchestrated the breach, yes, but I allowed it. The revelation hit like a physical blow. You let him bring me here? I have been fighting chaos for 40,000 years. I know their patterns, their schemes, their methods. When I detected Tzeentch reaching across dimensional barriers toward another reality, I investigated, and I found you. The presence softened slightly, becoming almost paternal. The one who saved his world by sacrificing himself. The one who found the third option when presented with false binary choices. The one who could see the code beneath reality and rewrite it. So, you're the one who corrupted the Matrix? Neo said, understanding flooding through him. That anomaly, that spreading code that Trinity said tasted like screaming. That was you reaching through Tzeentch's breach, using his own trap against him. Correct. I needed someone with your unique abilities. I needed them desperately enough to take an enormous risk. So, I touched your reality through the wound Tzeentch had opened. I created the bait that would draw you to investigate. And I ensured that when you touched it, you would be pulled through. Neo's hands clenched. You manipulated me. Just like the architect manipulated me in the Matrix. Yes. No apology in that simple acknowledgement. I have manipulated trillions across millennia. I have lied, deceived, and sacrificed countless innocents for the survival of humanity. I am not a good man, Neo. I am a necessary one. The honesty was somehow worse than deception would have been. At least villains could be opposed without moral complexity. The Emperor was offering brutal truth. He'd kidnapped Neo across dimensional barriers, condemned him to a universe where using his power could kill billions, all for the sake of a species Neo had never met. Why tell me this? Neo asked. Why not just order me to fix the throne? You're the God Emperor. You have absolute authority. Because the third option only works if you choose it freely. The Emperor's presence pulsed with urgency. Tzeentch's trap is elegant. Free me. Chaos wins. Save me through power usage. Reality tears apart. Chaos wins. Refuse to act. The throne fails eventually. Chaos wins. 3 options, all serving the same master. So what's the fourth option? Because there is no fourth option. The Emperor's words carried finality. There are only 3 choices, and all lead to catastrophe. Unless... The Golden Throne's mechanism shifted, and Neo felt something change in the sanctum's atmosphere. Systems he hadn't noticed activated, and suddenly he understood what the Emperor was showing him. Unless I become part of the throne itself, Neo said slowly. Not just repair it, integrate with it. Use my ability to interface with reality at the quantum level to supplement the failing systems. You would become what I am. A consciousness spread across machinery, maintaining systems through direct reality manipulation. But unlike me, you would not draw from the warp. You would draw from the quantum substrate itself, the very foundation of reality. And that wouldn't cause cascade failure? Not if done correctly. The throne already manipulates reality at quantum levels. It's designed for it. By integrating your consciousness with its systems, you would spread the energy drain across Terra's entire planetary structure. The load would be distributed, managed, sustainable. A pause. For approximately 10,000 years, perhaps longer. Neo understood the unspoken cost. And I'd be trapped, locked into the throne like you are. Conscious, but imprisoned. Aware, but unable to act. For 10,000 years. Yes, you would suffer as I have suffered. You would sacrifice everything as I have sacrificed. And at the end of that time, the throne would fail again, and humanity would need another savior. The Emperor's presence carried something that might have been sorrow. This is not the heroic sacrifice you made in the Matrix. That was death and resurrection. This is endless existence in service to species that will never know your name, never honor your sacrifice, never even understand what you've given up. And if I refuse, then I use the last of my strength to return you to your universe. Tzeentch loses his game piece. You return to your digital paradise with Trinity and the machines. And 500 years from now, humanity in this reality begins its final extinction. The choice crystallized before Neo with terrible clarity. Return home, save himself, let this universe burn, or sacrifice everything. His freedom, his identity, his very existence as a conscious individual to save a species that had done nothing but hunt him since his arrival. Red pill or blue pill. Except the Emperor had been right. This was a choice that only worked if made freely. No manipulation could force genuine sacrifice. No deception could create true willingness. This had to be Neo's decision, made with full knowledge of the consequences. "There's something you're not telling me," Neo said. "A being as intelligent as you, with 40,000 years of planning, you've got a longer game in play. This isn't just about buying another 10,000 years. A ripple of approval through the psychic pressure. Perceptive, yes, there is more. The Emperor's presence intensified, showing Neo visions of the future, or possible futures. In 10,000 years, with you maintaining the throne, humanity will have time. Time to evolve. Time to adapt. Time for new solutions to emerge. The stagnation ends not through chaos, but through gradual transformation. You're gambling that in 10,000 years, humanity can find a way to survive without the throne at all. I'm gambling that consciousness itself can evolve beyond its current limitations, that humanity can become something Tzeentch hasn't anticipated, that your sacrifice buys not just time, but possibility. Neo thought of Trinity, waiting in the Matrix. He thought of the peace they'd finally achieved, the world they'd built together. He thought of everything he'd be giving up. Then he thought of the billions on Terra, the trillions across the Imperium, the young woman with milky eyes who'd be burned as fuel for the Astronomicon if he did nothing, the Arbites who'd arrested him, just following orders in a universe that gave them no better options. Even Valerius, carrying impossible burdens because someone had to. In the Matrix, he'd learned that being the one meant making the hard choice, meant sacrificing yourself when necessary, meant finding the third option even when the game seemed rigged. This universe needed the one, just not the hero it expected. "If I do this," Neo said carefully, "I want something in return. Name it. When the 10,000 years are up, When the throne fails again, humanity doesn't repeat this cycle. No more sacrificing individuals for the collective. No more burning souls as fuel. Promise me that humanity will find a better way, or die trying." The Emperor's presence seemed to consider this. Then, "I cannot promise what I cannot control, but I will ensure that your sacrifice is remembered, that your choice becomes part of humanity's consciousness, that when the time comes, they understand what was given and why they must do better." It wasn't enough. But it was all Neo was going to get. He thought of Trinity one last time. Thought of sending her a message somehow, explaining why he wouldn't be coming home. But no, she'd understand. She'd always understood when he made the hard choice. "All right," Neo said, and the word carried finality. "Show me what I need to do." The Emperor's presence surged with something that might have been relief or gratitude or simply acknowledgement. The Golden Throne's mechanisms began to shift and reconfigure, creating a space beside the withered form of the God Emperor. "Thank you," the Emperor said. And in those two words, Neo heard the voice of a man who'd carried impossible weight for 40,000 years and could finally share the burden. Neo stepped forward toward the throne, toward imprisonment, toward sacrifice, toward 10,000 years of existence without freedom, toward being the one last time. The integration process began with pain, not physical pain. Neo's body was being carefully preserved by the throne's life support systems as cables and neural interfaces connected to his spine, his skull, his major nerve clusters. That part was managed with precision that spoke to 10,000 years of refinement. No, the pain was conceptual. It was the sensation of his consciousness expanding beyond the comfortable boundaries of a single human skull and spreading across machinery that touched reality itself. "Breathe," the Emperor's voice resonated beside him. "Do not fight the expansion. Your sense of self will fragment. Let it. You will reform, larger than before." Neo tried to follow the instruction, but breathing was becoming abstract. His lungs still functioned, still processed oxygen, but his awareness was no longer limited to that single biological process. He could feel the throne's atmospheric processors cycling air through the sanctum, could sense the life support systems maintaining his body temperature, could perceive the quantum fluctuations in the neural interfaces as they mapped his consciousness. It was like the Matrix, but reversed. In the digital reality, he'd learned to expand his awareness to encompass the code around him. Here, he was becoming the code. His thoughts were being translated into quantum states, his memories encoded into probability matrices, his very sense of identity distributed across systems designed to manipulate reality itself. How? Neo tried to speak, but found his voice strange, echoing across multiple dimensions. How do you stay sane? Sanity is negotiable when measured across millennia, the Emperor responded. You will learn to compartmentalize. Part of you will maintain the throne. Part will guide the Astronomicon. Part will remain here, aware and conscious, experiencing the passage of time. How much of you is still you? A pause, heavy with ancient sorrow. Less than there was, more than there should be. I have been dying for 10,000 years, Neo. You are not taking my place. You are supplementing what remains. Together, we will maintain humanity's light until your turn comes to fade. The integration deepened. Neo felt his consciousness touch the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that guided ships through the warp. It was massive, a lighthouse that shined through dimensions, powered by the Emperor's will and the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers. Neo recoiled from the horror of it, from the screaming souls being consumed to fuel humanity's survival. "I can't!" he gasped, trying to pull back. "I can't be part of that! I can't burn souls for fuel!" "You must. Or the Astronomicon fails, or 1,000,000 ships are lost in the warp, or humanity fragments and dies." The Emperor's presence surrounded him, not forcing but supporting. "This is the reality you chose to save. It is brutal, because anything less brutal would have died millennia ago." Neo wanted to argue, wanted to find another way, wanted to prove that mercy and survival could coexist. But his expanding consciousness showed him the galaxy. Really showed him, perceiving 1,000,000 worlds simultaneously. He saw forge worlds where workers died by the millions in industrial accidents that could have been prevented, but efficiency demanded otherwise. Saw agri-worlds where entire populations were lobotomized and set to endless labor. Saw hive cities where the lowest levels had devolved into prehistoric savagery. Saw shrine worlds where billions prayed to a god who couldn't hear them anymore because he was too busy keeping everyone alive. The Imperium was a horror, and it was also all that stood between humanity and extinction. "I hate this," Neo whispered, but his consciousness was already learning the rhythms of the Astronomicon, already understanding how to maintain its terrible light. "Good," the Emperor said. "Never stop hating it. The moment you accept this as acceptable is the moment you become a monster. Hate it, rage against it, but do it anyway, because the alternative is worse." Time became strange. Neo wasn't sure if minutes or hours had passed when he felt the integration complete. His body was locked into the throne beside the Emperor's withered form, connected by thousands of cables, sustained by systems that would keep him technically alive for millennia. But his consciousness, his true self, was spread across the entire planetary infrastructure of Terra, touching quantum substrates, maintaining reality anchors, supporting the dying God Emperor's desperate effort to guide humanity. And then he felt something else, a presence in the sanctum, though the doors hadn't opened. Tzeentch. Not physically present. That was impossible with the Emperor's wards and the Sisters of Silence patrolling the palace. But present nonetheless. A fragment of the Chaos God's infinite attention focused on this moment with gleeful anticipation. "No!" The voice boomed across dimensions, and Neo heard rage mixed with delight, fury mixed with laughter. "You weren't supposed to choose this. You were supposed to free him or destroy trying. You were supposed to be predictable," Neo said, and his voice resonated with power now, backed by the throne's mechanisms and the Emperor's guidance. "You thought you knew all the options. Free the Emperor. Chaos. Save him through power usage. Chaos. Refuse to act. Delayed chaos. But I found the fourth option you didn't predict." "There is no fourth option!" Tzeentch's presence raged, and Neo felt the warp itself twist with the Chaos God's frustration. "There is now," the Emperor said, his voice stronger than it had been in millennia, bolstered by Neo's support. "The one thing you can never understand, Tzeentch. Genuine sacrifice, freely given, without ulterior motive or hidden agenda. Neo chose this knowing full well what it would cost him." "Then he's a fool!" Tzeentch's voice cracked across reality. 10,000 years of consciousness locked in machinery, watching humanity repeat the same atrocities, unable to act, unable to change, unable to do anything but maintain a system he despises. Yes, Neo said simply, and I'd choose it again. The statement seemed to break something in the Chaos God's perception. Tzeentch was the master of schemes, the architect of plans within plans. He understood ambition and desire for power. He comprehended corruption and the seduction of forbidden knowledge. But pure sacrifice? Choosing suffering with no hope of reward? That was alien to him. "This isn't over," Tzeentch hissed. But the presence was already withdrawing, unable to maintain focus on something that didn't compute within his paradigm. "The throne will fail. He will fail. And when he does, I'll be waiting. Change is inevitable. Stagnation dies. Chaos always wins." "Maybe," Neo said, as the presence faded. "But not today. Today, humanity gets 10,000 more years. And that's 10,000 years for them to surprise you again." Silence fell in the sanctum, or as close to silence as existed when two consciousness were spread across planetary systems and galactic navigation beacons. Neo adjusted to his new existence, learning to process information streams that would have destroyed a normal mind. The Emperor guided him, showing him how to compartmentalize, how to maintain sanity across impossible scales of perception. "Thank you," the Emperor said again, and this time Neo felt the full weight of that gratitude. "You've given humanity another chance. What they do with it is up to them." "Will they remember?" Neo asked. "Will they know what was sacrificed?" "No. They will know that the throne was repaired, that a miracle occurred in the Sanctum Imperialis. The Mechanicus will study the new configurations and fail to understand them. The Inquisition will classify it as highest secret. The custodians will guard it eternally." A pause. "Only a few will know the truth. Valerius, Valoris, perhaps a handful of others. To the Imperium at large, you will be unknown. A nameless sacrifice in a civilization built on nameless sacrifices." "That's fine," Neo said, and found that he meant it. In the Matrix, he'd been the One, celebrated, remembered, mythologized. Here, he would be forgotten, and somehow, that felt right. True sacrifice didn't demand recognition. "There is one thing I can do for you," the Emperor said. "One small mercy." The Emperor's vast power focused, reaching across dimensional barriers with precision that only a being of his caliber could manage. Neo felt the connection form, a tiny thread of consciousness linking back to his home universe, to the Matrix, to a specific location where a specific person sat grieving. Trinity. She felt it immediately, her enhanced awareness recognizing the impossible. Neo couldn't speak. The bandwidth was too narrow, the connection too fragile. But he could send a feeling, a certainty. He was alive. He was where he needed to be. He'd made the choice freely. And he loved her, would always love her, even across 10,000 years, an infinite distance. He felt her understanding, felt her grief mixed with pride, felt her acceptance of what he'd done and why. Trinity had always understood him better than anyone. She'd known he would choose this path if given the option, because that's who he was, who he'd always been. The one who found the third option, who sacrificed everything, who saved his world, even when his world couldn't be saved in the way anyone expected. The connection faded. The thread broke. Neo was alone again, alone with the Emperor and the weight of humanity's survival. "I'm ready," Neo said, settling into his new existence, feeling his consciousness spread across systems that touched reality itself. "What do I need to do?" "Maintain," the Emperor said simply. "Endure. Hope. And when the time comes, when your 10,000 years draw to a close, trust that humanity will have learned enough to find a better way." Neo thought about that. 10,000 years. It sounded like forever. But he'd existed in the Matrix for what felt like eternity, fighting the same battle over and over. This would be different, harder, more painful, but also more meaningful. Because this time he was saving real people. Not digital constructs or philosophical concepts, but trillions of actual humans trying to survive in a universe designed to kill them. "One thing," Neo said. "When my time is up, when the throne fails again, make sure they know. Make sure humanity understands that sacrifice isn't about glory or recognition. It's about choosing to bear the weight so others don't have to." "I will ensure it," the Emperor promised. "Your story will be encoded in the throne itself. When the Mechanicus finally understands what you were, what you did, it will reshape their entire philosophy." "Good," Neo said. And then, because there was nothing left to say, because the choice was made and the path set, "Let's get to work." His consciousness expanded fully, taking on the burden of maintaining Terra's reality anchors, supporting the failing systems, channeling power from quantum substrates in ways that wouldn't tear holes in causality. It was exhausting and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. But it was also, in a strange way, peaceful. He was the one. And he'd found his purpose in a universe that desperately needed someone willing to bear impossible weight. For 10,000 years, he would maintain humanity's light. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The first century was the hardest. Neo learned to measure time differently when existence stretched across planetary system. Days became meaningless when you were simultaneously maintaining quantum stabilizers across Terra's continental plates, supporting the Emperor's psychic projection through the Astronomicon, and managing the horrific process of converting sacrificed psychers into sustainable energy. But he marked the years anyway, counting them like a prisoner marking days on a cell wall, because forgetting time meant forgetting humanity. The Emperor guided him through those early years with the patience of someone who'd already endured 10 millennia of similar torment. He taught Neo how to compartmentalize consciousness, how to let part of himself sleep while other parts worked, how to create mental constructs that could handle routine maintenance without his full attention, how to occasionally pull enough awareness back into his physical form to remember what having a body felt like. But mostly, the Emperor taught him how to endure. Pain becomes background noise after the first 1,000 years, the Emperor explained during one of their conversations. Dialogues that happened in nanoseconds across quantum channels, entire discussions compressed into moments. You will think you cannot survive another day. Then another century passes, and you realize you have. Neo watched the Imperium from his prison of gold and machinery. Watched wars consume billions. Watched planets burn. Watched the grinding brutality of humanity's survival play out across 1,000,000 worlds. And he understood finally why the Emperor had become what he was. Not a benevolent god, but a desperate guardian willing to commit any atrocity if it meant humanity survived another day. In the 10th year, Inquisitor Valerius returned to Terra. The Inquisitor was older now, his augmetics showing signs of wear. He stood before the Golden Throne, though he couldn't enter the sanctum itself, and spoke aloud, knowing Neo could hear. "I wanted you to know," Valerius said quietly. that the anomaly has been classified at the highest level. Only myself, Tribune Valoris, and a handful of others know the truth of what happened here. To the Imperium, the throne simply stabilized. A miracle attributed to the Emperor's will. He paused. But I know, and I'll ensure that others know when the time is right. Your sacrifice won't be forgotten, even if it can't be publicly acknowledged. Neo tried to respond, to thank the Inquisitor for his words, but found he couldn't manifest beyond the throne's systems anymore. That ability had been locked away as part of the integration, a necessary sacrifice to prevent any accidental reality warping. He could only listen as Valerius spoke a prayer in High Gothic, then departed. It was the last time anyone would visit just to acknowledge Neo's existence. The decades rolled past, then centuries. Neo watched the Mechanicus work on the throne, maintaining systems they no longer fully understood, praying to the Omnissiah while adjusting quantum matrices that predated their civilization. They never knew he was there, spread through the machinery, maintaining the real work while they performed their sacred maintenance rituals. He watched the custodians stand their eternal guard, each one a masterwork of genetic engineering, dedicated to protecting an emperor who was simultaneously alive and dead, conscious and comatose. They changed shifts every 100 years. The only way Neo could track time at that scale, watching new faces replace old ones, each generation more myth than man. He watched Terra itself evolve. The planet was constantly being rebuilt, reforged, reconstructed. Hives fell and were replaced. Oceans of chemical runoff were occasionally purified, then polluted again within centuries. The Imperial Palace grew larger, more baroque, more impossibly vast. Humanity's throne world was a living organism, constantly dying and being resurrected through sheer stubborn refusal to accept extinction. And through it all, he maintained the light. The Astronomicon burned across the galaxy, guiding ships through the warp, preventing humanity from fragmenting into isolated pockets that would be consumed by Xenos and chaos. Every day, 1,000 psychers were sacrificed to feed that light. Every day, Neo felt their deaths as they were converted into psychic energy, their souls burning to sustain the beacon. He never stopped hating it, just as the Emperor had instructed. In his 500th year, something changed. The Emperor's presence, which had been vast but diffuse, suddenly consolidated. For the first time in half a millennium, the God Emperor pulled enough awareness back to have a real conversation. "You're adapting well," the Emperor said, and Neo heard approval in the ancient voice. "I'm surviving," Neo corrected. "That's not the same as adapting. It is when survival requires transformation." The Emperor's attention focused more fully. "I need to tell you something. A truth I've kept from everyone for 10,000 years. Neo felt a chill despite having no real body to experience temperature. "What truth?" "I'm healing." The revelation sent shockwaves through Neo's distributed consciousness. "What?" "But the Mechanicus says the throne is failing, that without constant maintenance, the throne is failing, has been failing since the day Horus wounded me." The Emperor's presence carried something Neo had never detected before. Hope. "But my body, the physical form sitting on this throne, has been slowly regenerating for 10,000 years, so slowly that no instrument can detect it. But it's happening. How is that possible?" "Perpetual regeneration was one of my gifts." The Chaos Gods wounded me deeply enough that normal healing was impossible. But given enough time, given sufficient energy, given the daily sacrifice of 1,000 souls, the Emperor paused. I am regenerating. In approximately 9,500 years, I will have healed enough to awaken, to leave this throne, to walk among humanity again. Neo processed this information across multiple levels simultaneously. And you're telling me this now because you need to know that your sacrifice has an end point, not in 10,000 years, but sooner. When I awaken, when I can sustain the Astronomicon through my own power again, you will be freed. The Emperor's presence pulsed with something like gratitude. You bought me the time I needed to heal. Without you, the throne would have failed before my regeneration completed. You saved not just humanity, but me. What happens then? When you awaken, then the Imperium changes. Not through chaos, but through guided evolution. I will have 10,000 years of perspective. I will have learned from 10,000 years of mistakes. The Emperor's voice carried determination. And I will have your example. Your willingness to sacrifice without corruption. Your refusal to accept that brutality is the only answer. Neo felt something he hadn't experienced since integration, genuine emotion beyond the background processing of existence. You're going to change the Imperium? Make it less monstrous? I'm going to try. Whether I succeed, the Emperor's presence carried ancient exhaustion. That depends on whether humanity can evolve beyond its current state. Whether we can find ways to survive without becoming what we fight against. And me? What happens to me when you awaken? You will be freed from the throne. Your consciousness reconsolidated. Your body restored as much as is possible. A pause. You will have a choice, Neo. Return to your universe, to Trinity and the Matrix, or remain here in a changed Imperium and help me rebuild what we've broken. The offer hung in the quantum substrates between them. 9,500 years. Not 10,000, but close enough. And at the end, freedom. Choice. The possibility of seeing Trinity again, or the possibility of finishing what he'd started, helping humanity become something better than a slowly dying empire built on suffering. I'll think about it, Neo said. I've got time. The Emperor's presence carried something that might have been laughter. Yes, you do. The conversation ended, and Neo returned to his maintenance routines, but something had changed. Before, he'd been enduring endless imprisonment with no hope of release. Now, he had a countdown, a purpose beyond mere survival. He was buying time for the Emperor to heal, for humanity to have one more chance at redemption. It made the daily horror bearable. Not acceptable, never acceptable, but bearable. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. Neo watched the Imperium fight wars against orcs, tyrannids, chaos, and 1,000 other threats. He watched heroes rise and fall, watched entire chapters of Space Marines be created and destroyed, watched planets colonized and lost and reconquered. The galaxy was a meat grinder, and humanity kept feeding itself into it because the alternative was extinction. But he also watched moments of beauty. Watched colonists terraform dead worlds into gardens. Watched artists create masterpieces in hive cities where no one would ever see them. Watched soldiers show mercy when doctrine demanded execution. Watched parents sacrifice themselves for children. Lovers choose death together rather than separation. Ordinary humans performing extraordinary acts of compassion in a civilization that punished compassion as weakness. Humanity was brutal. But humanity was also beautiful, and both were worth saving. In his 1000th year, Neo felt something probe the edges of his consciousness. Not the Emperor, not the Mechanicus. Something from outside. A familiar presence reaching across dimensional barriers. Tzeentch. Still there? Neo? The Chaos God's voice whispered through quantum channels. Still maintaining the Corpse God's throne? Still sacrificing yourself for a species that will never thank you? Neo didn't respond. Engaging with chaos was always a mistake. I thought you should know, Tzeentch continued, that your sacrifice was meaningless. The Imperium grows more brutal every century, more corrupt, more desperate. You're not saving them. You're prolonging their agony. And yet, Neo said, breaking his silence, they're still alive, still fighting, still hoping. That's more than they'd have if I'd made your choice. Hope is the cruelest joke of all. It makes the inevitable ending so much more painful. Maybe, Neo acknowledged, or maybe hope is what separates us from things like you and the ability to choose suffering for the chance, just the chance, that things might get better. Tzeentch's presence radiated something between rage and amusement. 9,000 years left, Neo. 9,000 years of watching humanity disappoint you. 9,000 years of maintaining systems you despise. 9,000 years until the throne fails anyway and all your sacrifice means nothing. You're wrong about that last part, Neo said. But you won't understand why until it's too late. The presence withdrew, baffled and frustrated. Tzeentch could scheme and manipulate, but he couldn't comprehend genuine sacrifice. Couldn't understand choosing suffering without hidden agenda or eventual reward. That was his weakness. And maybe, in 9,000 years, it would be his downfall. Neo returned to his maintenance, to his endless watch, to his patient counting of years until freedom. He thought of Trinity, wondered if she'd moved on or if she waited, wondered if time in the Matrix flowed the same as time here. He thought of the Emperor, healing slowly in the depths of machinery, preparing for a second chance at guiding humanity. He thought of the choice he'd eventually have to make. Return home or stay and help rebuild. But mostly, he just endured. Because that's what being the one meant in this universe. Not being the strongest, not being the most powerful, not even being the hero. Being the one willing to bear the weight so others didn't have to, for 9,000 more years. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The millennia blurred together in ways that would have driven a normal consciousness to madness. But Neo had learned the Emperor's secret. You didn't fight the dissolution of self, you accepted it. You became something larger than one person's identity while still maintaining a core of who you were. A pearl of individuality wrapped in layers of function and purpose. In his third millennium, Neo witnessed the rise of a new threat. The Tyranids, a xeno-species so vast and hungry that they consumed entire galaxies. The hive fleets arrived at the edge of the Imperium like a cosmic plague. And Neo watched through the Astronomicon as thousands of ships were lost trying to stop them. He felt the psychic screams of billions as worlds were devoured, stripped of all biological matter, leaving behind dead rocks floating in space. The Emperor's consciousness stirred. This is what I feared, what I always knew would come. The Great Devourer, drawn by the Astronomicon itself like moths to flame. Can we stop them? Neo asked, already knowing the answer. We can slow them, Hurt them. Make them pay for every world in blood and biomass. But stop them? The Emperor's presence carried ancient sorrow. Not without changing everything. Not without risks that might destroy us faster than the Tyranids could. Neo watched the Imperium adapt. Watched the Mechanicus develop new weapons. Watched Space Marine chapters specialize in anti-Tyranid warfare. Watched the Inquisition burn entire sectors to create dead zones the Hive fleets couldn't cross. The brutality escalated, and Neo understood with grim clarity that every atrocity was necessary. Or at least, necessary given the constraints of what humanity had become. But he also saw the cost. Saw the Imperium becoming harder, colder, more willing to sacrifice millions to save billions. Saw compassion being bred out of populations, replaced with fanaticism and hatred. Saw the slow erosion of everything that made humanity worth saving. "Is this what we're preserving?" Neo asked during one of their conversations. "A civilization that's become as monstrous as its enemies?" "No," the Emperor said. "We're preserving the possibility that they can become something better. The raw material of humanity still exists. The capacity for compassion, creativity, love. It's buried beneath layers of trauma and brutality, but it's there. How can you be sure? Because I see it, every day, in small moments that never make it into official histories." The Emperor showed Neo visions, a soldier sharing his rations with a starving child. A tech priest secretly maintaining beauty and machinery when only efficiency was required. A planetary governor choosing to evacuate civilians when military doctrine demanded they be abandoned. These moments are rare, but they exist, and they prove that humanity can still choose to be better. In his fifth millennium, Neo felt something shift in the warp. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, tore across the galaxy, splitting the Imperium in half. A wound in reality so vast that entire sectors were lost to warp storms and demon incursions. Neo felt the Emperor's consciousness strain as the Astronomicon struggled to shine through the interference, felt the desperate effort required to maintain even partial coverage. And for the first time, he felt the Emperor begin to falter. "I'm dying again," the Emperor admitted, his presence weakening. "The rift is draining me faster than I can regenerate. I miscalculated. I won't have 9,000 years. I might not have 5. Neo felt panic, the first real emotion he'd experienced in millennia. "Then what do we do?" "You take more of the burden." The Emperor's presence began to contract, pulling awareness away from the farthest reaches of the Imperium and consolidating around Terra. "I'm going to enter a deeper healing state. Dangerous. I might not emerge, but if I do, the regeneration will accelerate. I could heal in centuries instead of millennia." "And if you don't emerge?" "Then you maintain the throne alone, for as long as you can. And when you fail, humanity dies." The Emperor's voice carried no drama, just simple fact. This is the risk. But it's the only chance we have. Neo felt the weight of the Imperium settle more fully onto his distributed consciousness. Felt systems he'd only been supporting suddenly become his full responsibility. The Astronomicon, the reality anchors, the quantum stabilizers, the psychic wards protecting Terra, all of it flowing through him now as the Emperor withdrew deeper into his withered body. "Wait," Neo said. "Before you go, I need to know. Did you plan this? Was this always part of your scheme?" A long pause. Then, "No. I planned for 10,000 years of healing. The Great Rift was unexpected, a consequence of forces even I couldn't fully predict." The Emperor's presence flickered. "But plans change, and if this is how it must be, then so be it. Have faith, Neo, in yourself, in humanity, in the possibility of redemption." Then the Emperor was gone. His consciousness pulled so deep into regenerative torpor that Neo could barely detect it. He was alone now, truly alone, for the first time since integration. The entire weight of humanity's survival rested on consciousness spread across a failing machine, drawing energy from reality's substrate, maintaining light in a galaxy torn by the greatest warp storm in 10,000 years. Neo wanted to scream, wanted to rage at the unfairness of it. He'd been promised 9,000 years until freedom. Now he might have only centuries. And if the Emperor didn't wake, he'd be trapped here until the throne finally failed and took Terra with it. But screaming accomplished nothing. Rage changed nothing. He'd learned that in his first century. All he could do was endure, was maintain, was hope. So he did. The centuries after the Great Rift were the hardest. Neo held the Astronomicon through sheer force of will, maintaining coverage in regions where the Emperor's light couldn't reach anymore. He watched the Imperium adapt to being split in half, watched new heroes rise to face impossible odds, watched a Primarch return. Roboute Guilliman, one of the Emperor's own sons, awakened after 10,000 years in stasis. Neo felt Guilliman's presence when the Primarch visited Terra, felt the demigod stand before the Golden Throne and weep for what his father had become. And Neo desperately wished he could speak, could tell Guilliman about the plan, about the healing, about the hope. But his voice was locked away, his consciousness too distributed to consolidate for communication. All he could do was maintain the light, as keep humanity alive. Trust that the Emperor knew what he was doing. In his 7,000th year, something miraculous happened. The Emperor stirred. Not fully, not awakening, but emerging from the deepest levels of regenerative torpor. His presence returned, weak but present, and Neo felt relief so profound it manifested as fluctuations in the Astronomicon that tech priests across the galaxy noticed and marked as divine signs. "I'm still here," the Emperor said, his voice stronger than when he'd withdrawn. "And I'm healing faster now. The gamble worked." "How long?" Neo asked, barely daring to hope. 2,000 years, perhaps 3. Then I can awaken. Then I can take the burden back. Then you can rest. 2,000 years. It was still an eternity, but it was also an end date, a real concrete deadline instead of vague promises. Neo could endure 2,000 more years. He'd already survived 7,000. What was 2 more? "There's something else," the Emperor continued. "Guilliman has returned. He's rebuilding the Imperium, fixing systems that have been broken for millennia. He's doing what I would have done if I could, making the Imperium more efficient, more rational, less wasteful." "Is it working?" "Slowly, incrementally, but yes." The Emperor's presence pulsed with something like pride. "He's proving what I always believed, that humanity can adapt, can change, can become better without losing the strength that keeps us alive." Neo watched Guilliman's reforms through the Astronomicon's lens, watched the Primarch struggle against 10,000 years of institutional inertia, fighting to make the Imperium more humane without making it weaker. It was an impossible balance, and Guilliman failed as often as he succeeded. But he kept trying, kept pushing, kept believing that the Imperium could be saved from itself. And in those efforts, Neo saw echoes of his own choice. The willingness to sacrifice, to endure, to bear impossible weight for the chance, just the chance, that things might get better. "I understand now," Neo said to the Emperor. "Why you manipulated me. Why you brought me here. It wasn't just to maintain the throne. It was to show you, and show humanity, that sacrifice without corruption is possible. That you can endure horror without becoming horrible." "Yes," the Emperor admitted. "I've been a tyrant for 40,000 years. Brutal because I believed brutality was necessary. But you..." The presence carried something like awe. "You maintained systems you hated without becoming hateful. You sacrificed everything without demanding anything in return. You proved that it's possible to be strong without being cruel." So what happens when you wake? When you walk among humanity again? "I become what you showed me I could be. Not a god, not a tyrant, but a guide, a teacher, someone who leads through example rather than force." The Emperor paused. "And I offer you the choice I promised. Return home or stay and help me rebuild." Neo thought about that. Thought about Trinity, waiting in a reality that seemed impossibly distant now. Thought about the Matrix, where he'd been the one in a simpler time. Thought about everything he'd lost. Then, he thought about everything he'd gained. The understanding of what sacrifice truly meant. The knowledge that he'd saved trillions of lives. The certainty that his choice had mattered. "Ask me again in 2,000 years, Neo said. "When you wake, when I'm free, when I can think clearly without being spread across a planet-spanning machine." "Agreed," the Emperor said. 2,000 years. Then you choose. And whatever you choose, know that humanity will forever be in your debt." "They'll never know," Neo pointed out. "They will. When I awaken, I'll tell them. Your story will be taught in every schola. Your sacrifice will be honored in every shrine. The man from another reality who saved the Imperium when its god could not." Neo felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia. A sense of completion, of purpose fulfilled. He still had 2,000 years to endure, still had countless horrors to witness. Still had the daily weight of maintaining systems that burned souls for fuel. But he also had hope. Real, concrete hope that this nightmare would end. That freedom waited. That choice would return. And in the grim darkness of the far future, hope was the most powerful force of all. The final 2,000 years tested Neo in ways the previous millennia hadn't. It wasn't that the burden grew heavier. If anything, with the Emperor emerging from torpor and sharing the load again, the strain decreased. No, what made these years harder was knowing they had an end. Knowing that freedom waited just beyond the horizon made every century feel longer, every decade a small eternity. But Neo had learned patience, had learned to exist in the eternal now, maintaining systems without dwelling on past or future. The throne had taught him that. The Emperor had taught him that. And slowly, day by day, year by year, century by century, the countdown continued. In his 8,000th year, Neo witnessed something unprecedented. The silent king of the Necrons, ancient machine beings who'd fought the war in heaven millions of years ago, approached the Imperium not as conqueror, but as diplomat. The Xenos leader sought alliance against the Tyranids, recognizing that the Great Devourer threatened all life in the galaxy, mechanical or biological. Gilliman took the meeting. Neo watched through the Astronomicon as the Primarch and the Silent King spoke. Two immortals discussing strategies to save a galaxy that wanted them both dead. The alliance was tentative, temporary, forged by mutual desperation rather than trust. But it existed. And its existence proved something Neo had wondered about for millennia. That even in this brutal universe, cooperation was possible. That even the Imperium's xenocidal doctrine could bend when survival demanded it. That change, real change, might actually be achievable. "Do you see?" the Emperor said, his presence now strong enough for daily conversations. "Humanity can evolve, can adapt. It takes crisis. It takes desperation. But we're not locked into eternal stagnation." "Or maybe we're just delaying the inevitable," Neo countered. "Trading one form of survival for another, always one step ahead of extinction." "Isn't that what all life does? Delays the inevitable? The question isn't whether we die eventually. It's what we become before we do." Neo pondered that as he maintained the quantum stabilizers through another solar flare, as he guided ships through the warp despite the Great Rift's interference, as he processed another 1,000 sacrificed souls into the Astronomicon's fuel. The horror hadn't lessened. He still hated it, but he understood it now in ways he hadn't before. This universe operated on different rules than the Matrix. There, reality was malleable, shaped by will and understanding. Here, reality was hostile, actively trying to kill you through entropy, chaos, xenos, and demons. Survival required brutality because anything gentler had been consumed millennia ago. But that didn't mean brutality had to be eternal, just necessary for now, until something better could be built. In his 9,000th year, the Emperor's regeneration accelerated dramatically. Neo felt it through their connection. Cells that had been dead for 10,000 years suddenly reactivating. Neural pathways that had degraded reforming. A body that had been a withered corpse slowly becoming human again. The process was agonizing, and Neo bore some of that pain as it echoed through the throne's systems. But it was also miraculous. The God Emperor was returning to life. "One more century," the Emperor said, his voice carrying excitement Neo had never heard before. "One more century, and I can leave this throne, can walk among humanity again, can begin the work of true reformation." "What happens to me?" Neo asked the question that had haunted him for 2 millennia. "Your consciousness will be reconsolidated, your body restored. You'll experience time normally again. Exist as a single being instead of distributed awareness." The Emperor paused. "It will be jarring. You've existed as part of a machine for 9,000 years. Becoming simply human again will feel like amputation." "I'll manage," Neo said, though he wasn't entirely certain. He'd adapted to being spread across Terra's infrastructure, had learned to think in parallel processes, to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously, to exist partially in quantum superposition, returning to a single body, a single perspective, a single moment at a time. That would be its own form of prison after the vastness he'd known. But it would also be freedom. The freedom to choose his actions instead of maintaining pre-programmed systems. The freedom to touch, taste, smell, feel in ways that distributed consciousness couldn't. The freedom to find Trinity, if she still existed, if the connection across realities could be re-established. The final century arrived with solar storms that threatened Terra's atmospheric processors. Neo managed them with practiced ease, his consciousness so deeply integrated with the planet's systems that he could adjust for geomagnetic fluctuations without conscious thought. He'd become, in a very real sense, the machine god the Mechanicus worshipped. The Omnissiah made manifest in quantum circuits and reality anchors. And soon, he'd have to give it up, have to become small again, have to return to being just Neo, just a man, instead of a distributed intelligence maintaining a planet. Part of him would miss it. The rest of him yearned for freedom with intensity that bordered on madness. On the final day, the day the Emperor had calculated his regeneration would complete, Neo felt the God Emperor's presence consolidate fully for the first time in 10,000 years. Felt awareness pull back from the galaxy's edge, from the millions of ships he guided, from the countless systems he maintained. Felt the Emperor gather himself like a warrior preparing for battle. And then, impossibly, the Emperor moved. A hand that hadn't twitched in 100 centuries closed into a fist. Eyes that had stared sightlessly for millennia focused. Lungs that had breathed only through mechanical assistance drew breath on their own. The God Emperor of mankind stood from the golden throne for the first time since the Horus Heresy, and reality itself seemed to shudder at the impossibility of it. Tribune Valoris and the Custodian Guard flooded into the Sanctum Imperialis, weapons raised, unable to believe what their enhanced senses told them. Their god, their eternal guardian who'd sat unmoving for 10,000 years, was standing, walking, alive in ways he hadn't been since before their order existed. The Emperor's physical form was magnificent. 10 feet tall, golden-skinned, with eyes that shone with inner light. He was everything the legends claimed and more. A being of such presence that reality bent around him, acknowledging his authority over physics itself. When he spoke, his voice resonated through normal space and warp simultaneously. "Kneel not before me, my custodians. I am no god. I am only a man who refused to die when his people needed him most." Then his attention turned to the throne seat, to the systems where Neo's consciousness still resided, and his expression softened with something approaching tenderness. "Now, my friend, now we free you." The Emperor's hands moved across the throne's controls with authority that came from being its original architect. Systems that had held Neo's consciousness distributed across planetary infrastructure began to reverse, to consolidate, to gather his awareness back into a single point. It felt like drowning in reverse, like being pulled from an ocean back into a single drop of water. Neo's vast perception narrowed, contracted, compressed, until he was aware of only one thing, one location, one moment: his body. Preserved in stasis beside the throne for 9,000 years, fed by nutrient tubes, maintained by systems that had kept him technically alive even while his consciousness spread across Terra. Now, as his awareness flowed back into that long, dormant form, Neo felt it awaken. Pain first. His nerves hadn't fired in millennia, and the sudden activation was agony. Then sensation. The feeling of lungs expanding, heart beating, blood flowing through vessels. Then awareness of boundaries. The shocking realization that he existed in only one place, could perceive only one moment, was once again merely human. Neo gasped, his first breath in 9,000 years, and opened eyes that had been closed since the day he'd integrated with the throne. The Emperor stood before him, one hand extended in greeting, golden eyes warm with approval and gratitude. "Welcome back, Neo. You've earned your rest." Neo tried to speak but found his voice hoarse from millennia of disuse. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. Muscles atrophied despite the stasis systems. He tried to reach for his power, for that ability to manipulate reality, but found it changed. Still there, but muted, as if 9,000 years of drawing energy through the throne's systems had permanently altered how he interfaced with reality's substrate. Custodians moved forward to support him, their impossible strength keeping him upright. Neo looked at them, then at the Emperor, then at the golden throne that had been his prison and his purpose for 9 millennia. The machine still hummed with power, still maintained Terra's systems, but it no longer needed him. The Emperor had retaken his burden. "What happens now?" Neo managed to croak. "Now?" The Emperor smiled, and it was the smile of a being who'd endured 10,000 years of torment and emerged stronger for it. "Now we rebuild. The Imperium has survived through brutality and sacrifice. But survival isn't enough. We must become something worth surviving for." He gestured, and custodians brought forth robes of state. "And you, Neo of the Matrix, will help me show humanity what that means, if you choose to stay." The choice, the one he'd been promised. Return home or remain here and help reshape a galaxy. Neo thought of Trinity, thought of the Matrix, thought of the peace he'd earned and abandoned. The connection the Emperor had shown him all those millennia ago had been one way, one moment. He didn't know if she still waited. Didn't know if he could even return after being so fundamentally changed by his time in the throne. Didn't know if going back was possible or wise. But he did know one thing. He'd spent 9,000 years watching humanity struggle and survive. Had seen their capacity for both horror and beauty, had maintained the light that kept them alive through impossible odds. And now, finally, there was a real chance to make it better. To prove that sacrifice without corruption, strength without cruelty, was not just possible, but sustainable. He'd been the one in the Matrix, had saved that world through sacrifice and choice. Now he had the opportunity to do the same here, not through power or force, but through example, through teaching a galaxy that had forgotten mercy how to be compassionate without being weak. "I'll stay," Neo said, his voice growing stronger. "For now. Help you rebuild. Show humanity that there's another way." He met the Emperor's eyes. "But afterwards? When the work is done? I want to go home. Want to see if Trinity's still waiting." The Emperor nodded slowly. "That is acceptable. And when that time comes, I will personally open the way across realities. It's the least I can do for the man who bought me 10,000 years of healing." He extended his hand again. "Do we have an accord?" Neo reached out, his hand still weak from stasis, and grasped the Emperor's in a grip that had sealed the fates of galaxies. "We have an accord." Outside the Sanctum Imperialis, Terra continued its endless cycles. Hive cities ground billions through their machinery. Ships departed for wars that would never end. The Astronomicon burned with the sacrifice of 1,000 souls. The Imperium remained brutal, desperate, one step ahead of extinction. But in the throne room, two beings who'd endured impossible suffering for the sake of humanity's survival stood together. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the future held something other than slow decay. It held possibility. It held change. It held hope. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there had been only war, now there was something else. The chance to be better. The news of the Emperor's awakening spread through the Imperium like a shockwave through reality itself. Astropathic choirs across 1,000,000 worlds screamed the impossible truth until their minds burned out from the psychic intensity. The ecclesiarchy declared it the greatest miracle since the Emperor's ascension. The Mechanicus calculated probabilities and found them all approaching zero. The Inquisition scrambled to control information that couldn't be controlled. And across the galaxy, trillions fell to their knees in prayer, weeping for a god who insisted he was merely a man. Neo watched it unfold from Terra, his body slowly recovering in the Medicae facilities beneath the Imperial Palace. Custodians stood guard outside his chambers, not as jailers, but as protectors. The Emperor had declared him a hero of the Imperium, and that declaration carried weight that transcended politics or protocol. He was untouchable now, sacred by association with humanity's returned guardian. But Neo felt anything but heroic. He felt hollow. 9,000 years of existing as distributed consciousness had left scars on his psyche that no Medicae could heal. Sometimes he'd reach for systems that weren't there anymore, trying to adjust Terra's atmospheric processors or guide ships through the warp. Sometimes he'd forget he had a body and try to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Sometimes he'd wake screaming from dreams where he was still trapped in the throne, consciousness fragmenting across infinite systems, while the Emperor slept and never woke. Tribune Valoris visited him on the 7th day of his recovery. The Captain General of the Custodians stood at attention beside Neo's bed, golden armor gleaming in the chamber's dim light. "The Emperor wishes to see you," Valoris said formally, "if you are strong enough to stand." Neo was. Barely. His muscles still ached from millennia of disuse, but the Imperium's medical technology was extraordinary. Forced regrowth treatments and neural restructuring, genetic therapy. They'd compressed years of rehabilitation into days. He dressed in the simple robes they'd provided and followed Valoris through corridors he'd perceived for 9,000 years, but never actually walked. The Emperor waited in a chamber that overlooked Terra's sprawl. He stood at a massive window, hands clasped behind his back, gazing at the planet he'd shaped and reshaped over 40,000 years. When Neo entered, the Emperor turned, and for a moment, Neo saw not the God King of legend, but simply a very old, very tired man who'd finally been allowed to rest. "How do you feel?" the Emperor asked. "Small," Neo admitted. "After existing as part of a planet, being just one person feels like I've been amputated from myself. That will pass. In time. Your mind will readjust to singular existence." The Emperor gestured to a chair. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Neo sat, grateful for the support. "What happens now? You're awake. You're walking among your people again. But the Imperium remains a nightmare," the Emperor finished. "Yes, I am under no illusions, Neo. Awakening doesn't undo 10,000 years of institutional decay. The Imperium is a dying beast, violent and desperate in its final throes. But..." He moved to the window, and Neo joined him, looking out at the endless cityscape. "It doesn't have to die. It can transform, slowly, carefully, with guidance from someone who's learned from millennia of mistakes. You're talking about reformation. Real reformation. Not just efficiency improvements. I'm talking about teaching humanity that strength and compassion aren't mutually exclusive, that survival doesn't require becoming monsters." The Emperor's voice carried determination. "Guilliman has begun the work on a practical level, improving logistics, reducing waste, making the military more effective. But I will work on a deeper level, changing philosophy, altering doctrine, showing through example that there are better ways. The ecclesiarchy will resist, Neo pointed out. They worship you as a god. They've built an entire civilization on faith in your divinity. Then I will tear down their temples and build something better. The Emperor's eyes blazed with inner fire. I never wanted worship. I wanted humanity to transcend its need for gods, to become strong enough, wise enough, compassionate enough to survive without divine intervention. He turned to Neo. And you will help me demonstrate that. Me? I'm nobody. A stranger from another reality. I have no authority here, no legitimacy. You have the greatest legitimacy possible. You sacrificed 9,000 years to save a species you'd never met. You maintained systems you despised without becoming hateful. You proved that it's possible to endure horror without becoming horrible. The Emperor's hand rested on Neo's shoulder. That's the lesson humanity needs to learn. And you are the proof it's possible. Over the following months, Neo watched the Emperor begin his work of reformation. It started subtly. Audiences with key officials where the Emperor questioned long-held doctrines. Visits to worlds where he demonstrated mercy instead of punishment. Compassion instead of cruelty. Public declarations that challenged the ecclesiarchy's teachings while affirming humanity's fundamental worth. The resistance was immediate and fierce. Cardinals denounced the Emperor as an imposter. Inquisitors launched investigations. Space Marine chapters debated whether to follow a living emperor who contradicted the teachings of their dead one. The Imperium fractured along fault lines that had existed for millennia, and Neo watched with growing concern as civil war threatened to tear humanity apart from within. But the Emperor was patient. He'd planned for 40,000 years. He knew how to play the long game. And slowly, incrementally, things began to shift. Worlds that tried compassionate governance found they functioned better than those ruled by fear. Soldiers who showed mercy found their enemies more willing to surrender. Citizens who were treated with dignity became more loyal than those who were oppressed. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. But it was progress. Neo participated where he could, though his role remained mostly symbolic. The Emperor paraded him before crowds as living proof of selfless sacrifice, told his story to gatherings of generals and governors, using Neo's choice as a counterpoint to the Imperium's doctrine of necessary brutality, made him a saint of the new order, not worshipped, but honored as an example of what humanity could aspire to. It was uncomfortable. Neo had never wanted to be a symbol, but he understood the necessity. If his suffering could inspire others to choose compassion over cruelty, then maybe those 9,000 years hadn't been wasted. A year after the Emperor's awakening, Neo felt strong enough to ask the question that had haunted him since his release from the throne. Can I go home? Can you really open a path back to the Matrix? The Emperor regarded him with those ancient golden eyes. I can. But Neo, you should understand what you're returning to. 9,000 years have passed here. In your universe, time flows differently. Your Matrix might have evolved in ways you can't imagine. Trinity might be. He paused delicately. Gone, Neo finished. I know. I've thought about it. But I need to know. Need to see for myself. He met the Emperor's gaze. I kept my end of our bargain. I stayed. I helped you begin the Reformation. Now I need to know if anything I left behind still exists. The Emperor nodded slowly. Then I will honor my promise. Come! They descended into the deepest levels of the Imperial Palace, past guard posts that had stood watch for 10,000 years, through corridors where reality itself felt thin. At the very bottom, in a chamber that predated the Imperium itself, the Emperor activated machinery that made the Golden Throne look primitive by comparison. This is from the dark age of technology, the Emperor explained, as systems older than human spaceflight hummed to life. A dimensional resonance engine. I've used it perhaps a dozen times in 40,000 years. It can pierce the barriers between realities, but only briefly and at tremendous energetic cost. The machinery built to a crescendo, and space itself began to tear. Neo saw through the growing rift, saw green code, saw the familiar architecture of the Matrix, saw a world where humans and machines coexisted in digital harmony. And there, sitting in a meditation chamber, unchanged by time, because time didn't touch her the same way in that reality. Trinity. She felt the rift immediately, her awareness snapping toward it with the precision of someone who'd been waiting 9,000 years for exactly this moment. Their eyes met across dimensional barriers, and Neo saw recognition, love, and understanding in her gaze. She mouthed words he couldn't hear, but understood perfectly. I knew you'd come back. The rift will hold for 60 seconds, the Emperor said. After that, I won't have the strength to open it again for decades. You must choose now, Neo. Stay here and help me complete the Reformation, or return home to the life you left behind. The choice he'd been promised. The freedom to decide his own fate after 9,000 years of service. Neo stood at the threshold between universes, between duty and desire, between the galaxy he'd saved and the woman he loved. He thought about the Imperium, about the work still undone, about the Reformation that would take centuries to complete, about the billions who would suffer if he left before the Emperor's vision could be fully realized. Then he thought about Trinity, about the peace they'd earned, about the life they'd built together in a reality where hope didn't have to be paid for in blood, about the simple joy of existing without the weight of galaxies pressing down on his consciousness. In the Matrix, he'd learned that being the one meant making the hard choice. But he'd made that choice, had sacrificed everything already. Had given 9,000 years when he'd been promised rest after 10,000, and had accepted that shortened timeline without complaint. He'd earned this, earned the right to go home, earned the right to be selfish, just this once, after millennia of selfless service. I'm sorry, Neo said, and he meant it. But I've done my part. Time for humanity to stand on its own. The Emperor smiled, and there was no judgment in it, only understanding. Go then, you've earned your rest, and know that the Imperium will remember you, the man from another reality who saved us when we could not save ourselves. Neo stepped toward the rift, stepped toward home, stepped toward Trinity, and a life that didn't require endless sacrifice. But at the threshold, he paused, turned back to look at the Emperor one last time. Thank you, Neo said. For letting me choose, for keeping your word, for showing me that even in the darkest universe, honor still means something. Thank you, the Emperor responded, for showing me that gods are unnecessary when humans can be extraordinary. Neo stepped through the rift, felt reality shift around him, felt the hostile physics of the 41st millennium replaced by the gentler rules of the Matrix. Felt Trinity's arms around him, felt her consciousness merge with his in the way only they could do. Felt home in a way he hadn't since the day he'd touched that corrupted code 9,000 years ago. The rift closed behind him. The Emperor stood alone in the ancient chamber, golden light fading from machinery that had served its purpose. He'd kept his promise. And now, with Neo's example burned into humanity's collective consciousness, he could begin the true work of reforming the Imperium. It would take centuries, millennia, but the Emperor had time, and more importantly, he had hope. Because if Neo could sacrifice 9,000 years to save strangers, then humanity could learn to sacrifice cruelty to save themselves. In the grim darkness of the far future, there was now more than war. There was the possibility of peace. Neo returned to the Matrix, a changed man. 9,000 years of consciousness distributed across planetary systems. 9,000 years of maintaining humanity's light while burning souls for fuel. 9,000 years of witnessing a civilization's desperate struggle for survival. These things couldn't be forgotten or erased. Even in the peaceful digital paradise he'd helped create, he carried the weight of what he'd endured. Trinity understood. She always understood. In the nights, or what passed for night in the Matrix, when he woke gasping from dreams where he was still trapped in the Golden Throne, she held him and reminded him that he was free, that the choice had been made, that he'd earned his rest. But rest didn't mean forgetting. Neo found himself thinking about the Imperium often, about the Emperor walking among his people, slowly teaching them that strength and compassion weren't enemies, about Guilliman continuing his practical reforms, about the countless billions trying to survive in a universe that wanted them dead. He wondered if the Reformation would succeed, or if the Imperium would eventually collapse despite the Emperor's best efforts. Most of all, he thought about the lesson he'd learned in that nightmare future. That sacrifice, true sacrifice, wasn't about glory or recognition or even reward. It was about choosing to bear weight so others didn't have to, about enduring horror without becoming horrible, about maintaining hope when everything suggested hope was foolish. In the Matrix, where he and Trinity had helped forge a lasting peace between humans and machines, Neo began to teach others what he'd learned. Not the brutality of the 41st millennium, that had no place here, but the core truth beneath it. That survival required sacrifice. That freedom demanded responsibility. That peace was sustained not by wishful thinking, but by individuals willing to stand guard against chaos. He told stories about the Imperium, about the God Emperor who'd guided humanity for 40,000 years, about the billions who died so trillions could live. The humans and machines of the Matrix listened with horrified fascination, unable to comprehend a reality so hostile to conscious existence. But they understood the deeper message, that the peace they enjoyed was fragile, maintained only by eternal vigilance. Years passed, real years, measured in the natural flow of time rather than the subjective eternities Neo had experienced on the throne. He and Trinity lived the quiet life they'd always dreamed of, teaching, learning, loving. But sometimes, on clear nights when the Matrix's simulated stars shone overhead, Neo would look up and wonder about that other galaxy, far away in a different reality entirely. He wondered if the Emperor's reforms were working, if the Imperium was becoming less brutal, more humane, if his 9,000 years of sacrifice had bought humanity enough time to evolve beyond their worst impulses. He wondered if Tzeentch still schemed in the warp, if the Tyranid still devoured worlds, if the Great Rift still split the galaxy in half. Most of all, he wondered if he'd made the right choice, if coming home was selfish or earned, cowardice or wisdom. Trinity found him one such night, standing alone under digital stars, lost in thoughts of a universe that existed only in memory. "Having regrets?" she asked softly. Neo considered the question carefully. "No, not regrets, but guilt, maybe." I walked away, left them to finish what I started. "You gave them 9,000 years," Trinity reminded him. 9,000 years of your existence, distributed across machinery, maintaining a civilization you had no obligation to save. If that's not enough, then nothing would ever be enough. The Emperor said I proved that sacrifice without corruption was possible, that humans could endure horror without becoming horrible. Neo's gaze remained fixed on the stars. But did I? Or did I just prove that outsiders can sacrifice for humanity while humanity keeps making the same mistakes? Only time will tell. Their time, not yours. Trinity took his hand. You were the one in our world. You saved us when we couldn't save ourselves. Then you did the same for another universe. But Neo... She turned him to face her. You can't save everyone. Can't fix every broken reality. Sometimes you have to trust that your example is enough, that the seeds you planted will grow without you tending them. Neo knew she was right. Intellectually, he understood that he'd done enough. Had given more than anyone could reasonably ask, but the emotional weight remained. The knowledge that somewhere, in another reality, people were suffering under systems he'd helped maintain. That his hands, metaphorically speaking, were stained with the blood of billions sacrificed to the Astronomicon. "Tell me about him," Trinity said, guiding Neo to sit beneath the simulated stars. The Emperor. What was he really like? And so Neo told her. Told her about a being who'd walked Terra before humanity knew the stars, who'd guided civilizations through wars and plagues and the collapse of reason itself. Told her about 10,000 years of willing imprisonment, of consciousness spread across a galaxy, of a father watching his children descend into darkness and being unable to stop it. Told her about the desperate gamble that had brought Neo across realities, about the reformation that would take centuries to complete. He wasn't a god, Neo said finally. He was just a man who refused to quit, who kept fighting even when fighting meant becoming the monster to keep worse monsters at bay. He made terrible choices, committed unconscionable atrocities, became the very tyranny he'd sought to prevent. But he never stopped trying to find a better way. Never stopped hoping that humanity could evolve beyond its worst impulses. Sounds familiar, Trinity said with a slight smile. Sounds like someone else I know. Neo looked at her, saw the love and understanding in her eyes, and felt something in his chest loosen. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had done enough. Maybe trusting that his example would inspire others was all anyone could do. Maybe that's what being the one really meant. Not saving everyone yourself, but showing others how they could save themselves. In the Warhammer 40,000 universe, thousands of light years away and separated by dimensional barriers that only the mightiest beings could pierce, the Emperor continued his work of reformation. He told Neo's story in halls of power and humble chapels alike. Made the sacrifice of the man from another reality a cornerstone of his new philosophy. Used Neo's example to challenge the Imperium's cruel doctrines and inspire something better. It would take millennia. The Imperium was vast, ancient, resistant to change, but change was happening. Slowly, incrementally. One choice at a time, one world at a time, one generation at a time. Humanity was learning that there were alternatives to endless brutality. That mercy could coexist with strength. That sacrifice didn't require cruelty. And in two realities separated by impossible distance, in universes operating on fundamentally different rules, the ripples of one man's choice continued to spread. Neo had been the one in the Matrix, the anomaly who broke the system and saved his world. Then he became something else in the 41st millennium, the bridge between realities who bought humanity 10,000 years of hope. Now finally, he was just Neo. Just a man who'd made hard choices and survived impossible ordeals and earned the right to rest. A man who'd proven that consciousness could exist anywhere, in any form, and still choose compassion over corruption. The Emperor had been right about one thing. Gods were unnecessary when humans could be extraordinary. And in the end, that was the lesson both universes needed to learn. That salvation didn't come from divine intervention or ultimate power or cosmic destiny. It came from individuals choosing, moment by moment, to bear weight for others, to sacrifice without expecting reward, to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. Neo had been the one, but so could anyone, if they made that choice. In the grim darkness of the far future, there had been only war. But now there was something else. Now there was proof that even in the worst universe imaginable, change was possible. That sacrifice mattered, that hope endured, and that maybe, just maybe, humanity could become something worth saving. The Emperor protects. But only because extraordinary humans chose to stand beside him and share the weight. That was the real miracle. Not divine power or cosmic destiny, but choice. Free choice. Made with full knowledge of the cost. The choice to be the one. Not because you were destined to, but because when the moment came and the universe demanded someone step forward into darkness, you chose to say yes. The Emperor protects. More stories await.